Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. So, you're telling me, you disregarded the rules, and attacked Hellwing Naruto for keeping the end of his bargain. Which you did so brazenly in front of my own sister resulted half of the Crusader Legion, destroyed. Is that what you're telling me here, Captain? Cammy said her words sharp enough to through the hardest of metal and freeze the sun. Her eyes glaring down on the leader of the force who at the moment was quivering in fright. Megami was on the sidelines watching with a stern expression, as was a few other gods and goddesses. Yes, Kami-sama, was the words from the captain, thinking he hadn't done anything wrong, since he was trying to gain the chosen one's mother from the unholy grasp of that monster. I see. Are you a fool? Her words echoed around the court with enough divine power in each word to shake the court and make the mighty Crusader L Legion into a trembling, whimpering mess and made her fellow deities shiver. Her eyes glowed with an angerful look within, her face set into a scowl at the fools before her. KK Kami-sama, was the words the scared captain spoke. You defiled my rules, broke them, ignored them. The laws I set even before you were created. And you want retribution for the law you broke. You're a fool. Hellwing had all rights to attack back when you and your legion tried to interrupt the deal. You should know by now, deals made between demons and humans are set in stone. No matter who they are. The ancient rule never to be broken, yet you did, and so carelessly. Her words making the captain and the rest of the legion go into shock. Cammy sighed before sitting up straight, her eyes gaining a stony look. She already had reports from what her guardsmen had done and she couldn't be more infuriated. They had all but broke her laws and attacked Hellwing. With the words from her sister as well during the time had all but made her decision she was about to make all the more certain. But Kami-sama, only for him to be silenced when Cammy all but smashed him into the ground with just her glare alone. No buts. I have decided your punishment. This got many raised eyebrows from other deities, unlike her sister who already knew what she was going to decree. The legion though felt confusion rise in them. Punishment. Why were they being punished for a deed they thought was justified? What punishment? The captain spoke, regretting his words almost as quickly as he said them. Your punishment is the Most High second to being. I will have you and your men stripped of your rank, title and banished from the castle where you will serve the rest of your lives in solitude, where you will repent for your actions against me. And to make sure you fools never try this again, I will make an example out of you. Since your punishment is close to heresy, I will treat you as such. Before anyone could understand what she meant, Cammy merely raised her hand and with a subtle twitch of her finger she caused the clueless captain of the Crusaders to be flung her way by an invisible force before he was seen floating right in front of her. His shock was present only to be replaced with terror when Cammy's cold, unforgiving orbs pierced through him as her words seemed to cause every occupant within the room to stiffen. For your disobedience I will deliver your punishment myself and teach you what happens when you disobey my ALWS, she said before she slowly stood up to her full height, before she raised her hand before pointing her index finger between the captain's eyes. Slowly white energy coated the tip of her finger before she spoke, her azure ice-cold orbs bore through the man's own. Please KK Kami SS Sam NNN no. The man begged and pleaded but was ignored entirely as she without hesitation stabbed her finger right into his temple, not enough to pierce it, but enough for her energy to burn through his flesh and bone to mark him. Slowly, as she ignored his agonizing screams, she dragged her finger across the man's forehead, creating a scorched line mark across the man's forehead, which she ran down the left side of his face before ending it at his left eye, which she with brutal efficiency plunged her energy-coated finger into his eyes, crushing and burning it away, melting it within his eye's socket. Ignoring his screams, Cammy emotionlessly grabbed the captain by his head before effortlessly hurling him into his petrified legion, sending them tumbling to the floor. However, everyone was still stuck in a shocked stupor at what they saw. It was a very rare sight, almost non-existent, for Kami to ever hand and deal out such punishment and to such a degree, but it also reminded them that to cross Kami was the last thing any god or goddess ever dared to do for Idmanthus. Or worse. They could only watch as she sat back down in her seat and beckoned the legion out, her tone cold and toneless. "Now, get out of my sight." Which the shocked legion could only nod their heads down before walking out of the court, their honor gone for disobeying their master, carrying their unconscious captain to seek out medical help for his injury. After they left, the other deities followed, as they too were a bit shaken by Kami's action, leaving only Megami and Kami in the court. Once the door finally shut, Kami's face broke out into a sigh with a frown adorning her face. Megami saw her sister's situation and spoke. "Something wrong, Kami ne-chan?" Her words softer with only her and her sister alone. Kami just looked up and smiled despite the annoyance in her eyes. "No. Well, not really, it's just Hellwing. Something about him is just so interesting, and I guess when those fools dared to break my law and assault him even causes me to get angrier than usual," she said, with as her frown turned into a small wistful smile at the mention of that certain devil. Megami only nodded with a smile of her own as she remembered the devil she saw up close just mere moments ago. To feel the brunt of his power and see his transformation before her very eyes was something she wouldn't forget for a long time, nor would she try to. After all, the devil was a subject of immense interest between her and Kami. "Ah yes, well, all I can really say is that he's a strange one. Especially after all the times we've watched him," her face adorning a small smile as well. Kami just nodded, remembering the times she and her sister watched the strange yet very powerful devil rise in fame in hell. The deities knew she and Megami had watched the devil and had questioned her, and some had just plain thought it was a bit disturbing she and her sister were so interested in the unholy being. Yet they dared to never question them, leaving the two goddesses to their actions. But watching over him over the years, the two women had strangely developed an immense interest in the devil, to the point one would question if it was admiration, affection, or plain outright love for the devil. They never dwelled on such things, nor did they dare to, but the pegging of such a thing for the two to ever love the devil, the very being who opposes all of heaven, was ludicrous, crazy, insane. And yet they couldn't deny they felt something for the devil. Their feelings for him were strange at best and could only be described at best that they held interest in him and kept an eye on him to watch as he grew into the devil he was today. "Though, I've got the strangest feeling something big is gonna happen. Something catastrophic," her words making Megami frown. Who knows? The future is always changing, my dear sister." Kami nodded at her sister's words, but couldn't help but feel something big was gonna happen. And it would shake the three realms immensely. If only the two knew this change would alter their lives forevermore. 60 years later, hell. It's been a small yet very long 60 years in hell, and many things have happened since Naruto brought Kushina in as his slave and made her into a devil. One thing was that Naruto wasn't kidding when he said he would be training her in her demonic powers for the next day. When they arrived, he had pushed her through the same training regimen he did to Mito. He made her do everything to get stronger, just as he did for Mito. And to Naruto's secret approval, she pulled through every challenge he sent at her with fervor to get stronger and prove herself to her master. The one that saved her from her nightmare and gave her a new life away from Ningenkai. Kushina, to Naruto's standards, was almost up to par with Mito. It would seem Kushina was much more in tune with training and sparring with either him or Mito made her power jump by leaps and bounds. Mito, though, didn't slack up a bit. If anything, she trained even harder than ever before. Maybe it was because she had someone to train with. Someone that she could actually challenge without be beaten into the ground each time. Or maybe it was something else. Who knows? Only that Naruto knew the two, for the lack of the better word, were the perfect team, Mito the long-range fighter, as Kushina herself was a close-range fighter. Both worked out their weaknesses and made them their strong points, so their teamwork was most amazing. Hell, when they both fought together against Naruto himself, they were at least able to injure him in their devil forms, going all out while also making him actually put some effort to fight back. They were at the strength together of a second-level high demon, just under the level of a king, then a titan. Now when he gives them the time to gain experience with fighting other demons, their power and skill grow even more amazing. He himself was strong, yes, very strong, but over the last 60 years since his massacre of the Crusader Legion in front of Mito and Megumi has made something within him crack, making his power jump each passing day. He didn't know what it was, but did welcome it with open arms, since he knew he was stronger than Lucifer, that he had no doubt in. But why was Lucifer still alive? Simple. Naruto wanted him alive. For one simple purpose, and that was to show him the difference between themselves. In both power and skill. Kushina at one point, as did Mito once meet Lucifer when the devil had come to battle Naruto once more, and saw how amusing it was in Naruto's eyes, as the last time they first fought they were on equal footing. But on that one fight Naruto was toying with the devil, making it look equal, but it was a fake that Naruto had kept up for years since his return with Kushina and Mito. It served its purpose, as it kept Lucifer fueling and how he wanted to get stronger to his former student. The fool he is and always will be. Though word did reach Hell about the Crusader Legion's punishment and of how they were stripped of their rank before thrown into solitude for disobeying Kami's rule and law. Naruto chuckled when he heard it. It was fitting, really, and amusing as well, to see how the fools paid the price for their actions. Although if it was him, he'd skin them alive before throwing them into the pits of hell, where they would be tortured for all eternity. Kushina hadn't changed much in appearance since her time in hell, but her attire was more tight-fitting than the loose kimono her friend Mito wore. For Kushina wore a crimson kimono along her body, hugging her hourglass figure perfectly, as a black tobi was wrapped around her waist, which held her maroon-colored katan through her tobi as hoister. Black swirls adorned her kimono, while the banga of her hair were held up by a yellow hairclip. The Uzumaki insignia was etched into the back of her kimono's fabric. Overall she looked deadly. One very deadly devil empress. Hell, many mistook her for the twin sister of Mito for their looks, but different tastes in combat. At the moment we could find both Kushina and Mito kneeling on the ground, panting. Their eyes were glistening in exhaustion, yet pride at their latest achievement. For in front of them was Naruto, standing in front of them, his arms crossed with a giant gash across his chest. His own eyes showing signs of approval as well. Good job, you two. You've injured me to this extent. Only for Mito to point out her own answer with a smile on her face. True, but that's nowhere near to truly injure you. But I do see the improvement we're making. Naruto just shook his head at Mito's words. True, they did injure him, but the gash already started stitching back together, closing up the wound, leaving in seconds not a single blood stain. Though to even hurt him was something, for it was impossible to do due to his remarkable regeneration. Alright, that's enough for today. Go rest, you'll need it for tomorrow's training. Which they both nodded at. Though when Naruto cast his gaze from Mito to Kushina, he saw something in her eyes that made him frown. It was sadness. Hell Street of Helma. Walking along the streets of Helma, the village of demons of all kinds, was Naruto, his slaves on both his sides. Demons all parted way from them, or those that knew of Naruto's reputation steered clear. However, it was the children that gazed upon the devil in awe and reverence. It was like the stories they heard was true from their parents. The legendary devil was as their parents told them about was. The hair, the face, the clothes, everything about him was true. Naruto walked through the street, his face indifferent as ever. The reason for their visit to this city was for a means, as he got word that a demon titan was causing havoc in the town and was murdering innocent demons and children. But honestly, he didn't care about that. What he did care about was that the fool was using his name as a leverage. He heard rumors the demon was his underling and used that as a way to get away with things he did. He didn't like that. He did not like that at all. If there was another thing Naruto hated with a passion, it was those that used their name or fame to get away with other things. But this demon was using his name to do acts like this. That he would not allow. Hey mister. Hearing the words, Naruto looked over his shoulder to see 3 kids with 2 adult demons. All of them were, from what he could tell, the Inu demon. Very powerful demons that could be powerful in their own right, or peaceful beings that wanted nothing to do with violence. Raising an eyebrow, he spoke, "Yes, child." His words cold and indifferent. Mito and Kushina looked on at the sight with curious eyes. It was rare for people to speak to their master, and especially children, since some were either scared of him from stories they were told, or the deeds known throughout hell was told to them made them too awed at his sight to even speak with him. You are you with that BB big meanie?" the little female dog demon asked in a stutter. Naruto rose an eyebrow before giving a slight brief glance to the parents, who of which tensed before casting worried looks at their children. Looking back down at the children, he spoke. "Big meanie. No, I'm not." This made a male Inu Uchiha look up with hopeful eyes as his tail wagged back and forth excitingly. Then are you gonna take care of him? I mean, beat him up and take him away from here. He's caused us so much pain. Which Naruto just looked at the little child before turning his head back in its original direction. That is correct. Before he walked away, his slaves following in behind him. He never saw the wide and hopeful eyes of all the Inu demons along with those that heard the conversation. With Naruto, he had only been a few minutes until they got to their designated spot. It was a pub basically, where he and his slaves could already feel the Uchiha within, so with a slight knock, the door was slammed off its hinges and into the wall, silencing all the actions that just went on in the pub. All eyes were on Naruto, with Kushina and Mito behind him looking upon the wide-eyed demons in cold indifference. Naruto took a step forward and spoke. "Now, which one of you is named Garrosh?" he said, and just as quickly as those words left his mouth, all pointed at a demon that just ran out the door. Twitching, Naruto sighed, rubbing his temples. "Pathetic fool," he said before all 3 vanished like the wind, only to appear in front of a demon that halted right in its steps. Its big hulking body froze in midstep. Its red eyes wide in terror as Naruto appeared in front of him with a sinister look in his purple eyes. They were all on the streets of the Helma, with villagers alike looking upon the scene with fear of what was gonna happen. The demon was named Garrosh Hellscream, who in general was a blood-red-skinned fell orc which dwarfed the size of other regular orcs. This was another demon titan that was known for his brute strength and abilities to rupture and upheave the very ground of hell, earning him a fierce reputation as a demonicking machine. Yet that meant nothing to the devil before him, not that he knew who this truly was. "So you're the one that's been using my name to cover up your crimes, right?" Garrosh then right there answered his question by speaking. "And just who are you exactly? 'Cause you know if you attack me, my boss Hellwing Naruto will come down here and you, before taking your little whores with you," it said with a lecherous grin when its gaze set upon Kushina and Mito. Now this was a very bad thing to say, since for one both Mito and Kushina gritted their teeth in anger as their demonic aura came off them in waves. The second thing that happened was, Naruto's eyes gained a much more evil look in them before his eyes quickly gained a slit within. "That, you foolish child, was a mistake for one. Who do you think you're talking to? You say you work for Hellwing Naruto. Do you even know what he looks like? Well, let me give you the picture, right in front of you, for I am Hellwing Naruto." His words making the demon take a step back in shock once its eyes finally settled upon his appearance. His form started to tremble shakily as the combining demonic auras started to push down on him. Taking a step forward, Naruto spoke once more as his eyes flared purple as his form flashed in demonic aura. And insulting my slaves was your second and worst mistake you'll ever make again. With that, Naruto descended upon the demon, laying down a beating so horrible that many demons that watched flinched and closed their eyes as the horrible screams from Garrosh echoed all across the village as his blood painted the walls and flew into the air. Crushing his tusks and jamming one through his chest, he sent the orc through several buildings before sending him into the ground, causing it to crater beneath the behemoth of an orc. Before the demon had time to even get up, Naruto was already there, his heel coming down, which slammed into the orc chest area, causing a faint crack before the orcs caved in on itself while Garrosh's eyes bulged in agonizing pain. Such strength! Soon Garrosh was reintroduced to a whole new realm of pain. 15 minutes later, once the beating was over with Garrosh beaten and bloody, was over Naruto's shoulder as he and his slaves walked down the streets. They were on their way to throw the body into the hellfire pits where the demon could be tormented for what he has done. He didn't get off easy with Naruto and won't certainly ever again. Too busy screaming for mercy as his flesh and bones are burnt away only to regrow again, making his pain endless. As they walked, though, Naruto kept giving small glances at Kushina since he had been seeing her act weird lately, strange actually, since she was usually a ball of energy most of the time. That's when he heard something. The mister did it. He beat the big meanie. Was the voice Naruto knew too well. Looking to his right, he saw the family of 5 Inu demons looking at him in either gratefulness from the parents or the awe looks from the children. That's when the youngest, a little female-looking Inu, ran over to him, her big black eyes wide in awe. She reached his leg and looked up at him with a smile on her face. Thank you, sir," she said before doing something shocking. She hugged his leg. This made Naruto freeze up while Mito and Kushina looked worried at what would happen next. Their master, if anything, was cruel even to children sometimes, and his bloodlust from the little battle might not had been sated. So what if he? Only for the devil to slowly gaze down at the small Inu demon before he spoke tonelessly. It is of no trouble, he simply deserved punishment for using my name for protecting for his actions, and that is all. Now go to your parents, little one. He said, causing the demon to look before giving a timid nod once she figured out what she had done before running back to her parents. Without pausing a second time, Naruto walked forth, followed by his 2 Uzumaki servants, though this action had been watched by both redheads, and one being Kushina, who watched this with a small smile on her face before she remembered her own child. Looking down at her belly, she rubbed it as a small tear fell from her eyes when she remembered all the time she spent with the unborn child, the one she gave birth to, only die on her same birth. Though she never saw the frown on Naruto's face as his eyes were set upon her at her action. Next day, Naruto's residence. It's been a day since their little outing at Helma, and things have been very tense as of late. Mito noticed how Kushina was sometimes avoiding her and Naruto, and of how she was always silent around them. They both could tell something was wrong with her, but Naruto hadn't said a thing about it yet and told Mito when she asked him for help that to let it play out. For now. That is, until night came. Did something happen? Tossing and turning in her bed, Kushina gripped her sheets as she whimpered ever so softly. Tears started to form in her clenched eyes as her lip trembled and quivered as the nightmares within her mind kept haunting her every second. Naruki-chan, no. Kushina screamed as she watched her unborn child be completely vaporized by the flowing yukai from Kyuubi. Grasping her head with both hands, she shook her head only to see another scene of her 1-day-old daughter. Her bright blue eyes glaze over as the chakra of the Kyuubi became too much for her, and soon, to Kushina's utmost horror, Naruki's little eyes were soon devoid of any life. No. 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 Naruki-chan. 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 Her shrill scream echoing all in her room. Realizing what she did, she tried to cover it up only for her face to have tears going down them ever so rapidly. In his room, Naruto's purple eyes snapped open when he heard Kushina's scream and jumped out of his bed before bursting through his door. Upon getting to her door, he kicked it open only to see the sight of a sobbing Kushina. Walking over to her, he saw she was still asleep but was still muttering the name Naruki over and over. Grasping her shoulder, he shook her. "Kushina, wake up." Gasping, she snapped open her eyes only to see the face of her master looking down at her with an impassive face. "Kushina, what's wrong?" His words made her look the other way before she pulled herself up and scooted away from him a bit. Nothing. Naruto-sama." Though her horrified face said otherwise, seeing he wouldn't get anywhere with his usual way of speaking, he spoke a bit more gently but still firmly while grasping her shoulder. "Kushina, tell me, what's wrong?" The woman all but froze at his touch before the proverbial dam broke. His touch alone made her break down. Before Naruto knew it, Kushina was crying into his chest, her arms grasping his shirt as tightly as she could. Her tears and sobs soaking his shirt. Frozen at the sudden contact, he looked down at his sobbing red-headed slave and blinked. Well, this is awkward. Not seeing any other way to handle this, he awkwardly wrapped his arms around her. Though when he did so he felt something in him beat a bit faster, he frowned at what it was and pushed it down. It was a strange feeling but something he didn't wanna feel right now. That's when he heard the door open. Glancing, he saw Mito walk in and saw her questioning gaze. Shrugging, she walked over and sat on the other side of Kushina and started to pat her back gently. Rubbing her back tenderly, she spoke, "Kushi-chan, what's wrong?" Only for her to keep crying into Naruto's chest. Seeing she wouldn't be talking for a bit, they all sat there waiting for her to calm down. It took a few minutes but slowly and assuredly Kushina slowly got control of herself. Yet she was still in Naruto's arms. Pulling away a bit, she wiped her eyes from her red puffy eyes. I'm sorry for that." Mito just rubbed her back as Naruto kept looking at her with a questioning gaze. "It is of no trouble, Kushina. Now tell me, what is wrong?" Knowing she couldn't get out of this, she sighed. "It's just, I miss her. I miss my baby Naruto-sama, my daughter, my Masumi, my Naruki-chan. Every time I go to sleep I have nightmares of her little baby form dead in so many ways. They won't quit haunting me and it's starting to tear me apart." She finished before closing her eyes to hide the tears. Mito just looked at her with a sad look in her eyes. Naruto himself frowned before sighing in a bit of irritation. "I see, I was afraid of this. Well, you see, Kushina, the reason you're like this is because you didn't live a full life. Unlike Mito here, who lived a good century and 20 years. You died a young life as a newly first mother, a way that is quite possibly the worst way to die. So it's no surprise you're being haunted by visions from your previous life," he said, looking at Kushina with curious eye. "It also makes it a bit worse that you have these dreams, since you feel you have no one you truly believe will help her. This is what happens when mortals don't live to their fullest and die so early on," which made Kushina look down sadly, knowing she had died so early on the day of her daughter's birth. "But what I'm curious about is that, Kushina, is the subject of her being a Jinchuriki a secret?" Which Kushina just nodded, her head still laid upon Naruto's chest, feeling the slightest comfort and warmth from him. "Yes, it is a well-kept secret that she is a Jinchuriki. That is how I and Mito's position was kept secret. It was never told of what we contained." Naruto nodded at this. "I see, then your daughter, she should be okay. If the secret is kept safe, then she should be living a partial normal life, and if she inherited your luck, her life might be better in the future. So there is no need to worry, Kushina. which the woman begrudgingly nodded before falling asleep in Naruto's arms. Seeing this made Naruto feel in an even more awkward position and looked at Mito. Giggling at his almost nervous expression, she got up before she helped Naruto set her back to sleep. After seeing she was fine, they walked out of the room, Mito still giving her form a sad look before she walked out first. As Naruto himself walked out, closing the door, his eyes gave her form one glance with a look in his eyes that showed something. Something none one would see in his eyes ever. It was sadness. Then he closed the door, not knowing this event would be the chain reaction to churn the three realms forever. But later on, even with her state of being helped by Mito and her beloved master, the force of not seeing her daughter came back to her, and, in much more force than ever before. Though she hid it best she could, it was slowly getting harder each passing day. Just seeing her little daughter dead and, now ways of calling out her kept haunting her even more. Now though it finally got to her and, she needed help, and she needed it now. She wanted to get rid of the nightmares which haunt her at every turn. So it was a great surprise that as Naruto and Mito were training on the outskirts of Naruto's residence, did Kushina come out of the forests with a very nervous look in her eyes. Naruto rose an eyebrow at her as Mito blinked before speaking. "Hey Kushi-chan, is something the matter?" Which the red-haired woman just stopped in her tracks only this time. She stood right in front of Naruto, her head down as her shoulders shook, her hands were clenched so hard they were cracking and popping under the pressure. "In Naruto-sama, I know I've been acting strange lately, but it has been somewhat a strange thing for me to say. It's just that I want to see her. I want to see my child so much. I miss her so dearly." She shouted the last word before falling to her knees before her master. Knowing what she was doing was shameful, so shameful, and especially of her master, but she just couldn't help it anymore. She missed her baby, her little daughter, her Naruki-chan. She wanted to see her, hug her, anything to just see her. Naruto kept his gaze on Kushina as Mito slowly closed her eyes with a sad smile on her face came up. That's what's been bothering her. Why didn't she see it? She thought Kushina had gotten past it already, but looking at her master, though, she could see the hesitant look in his eyes as he thought up of how he should answer her. "I see. You wish to see her. Is that correct?" Kushina only nodded, not wanting to look up. But Naruto didn't have any of that, so with a slow kneel he cupped her chin and pulled her face up slowly, showing her tear-stricken face, her eyes glistening wet as tears fell from her eyes. Her lip trembled and quivered each second. "Is that what you want, Kushina?" Which the woman just broke down even further before she spoke. "Yes. I want to see my baby. Damn it." Before she slammed her face into his chest. Hearing her answer, he sighed before giving Mito a glance, to which she nodded. "Very well then. I can do that. I can't take you to her, but I can show you how she's doing at the moment," which Kushina, who at the moment was in Mito's arms, just nodded. "Yes. That's fine. I just wanna see if my baby is okay." Her voice strained to the max as her eyes were cast down in shame for doing what she did. She just couldn't control it anymore. She wanted to see her child, but to break down, cry and yell at her master. She felt so horrible and disappointed with herself that she only in her sister figure's arms did she feel better. "I see. Understandable. I was actually predicting you would ask this, but I just waited for you ask. Anyway, here we go." With that, Naruto mumbled a few words before speaking. "Akuma no Yona Magiku. Hyoji Mira, Demon Magic, Viewing Mirror." With that, Naruto opened up a big-sized mirror which viewed the life of the one he wanted to know. He predicted many things when it showed Kushina's daughter. He predicted her living a somewhat normal life, a life where she was protected even. He was dead wrong. For when he opened the mirror, hell would forever be shaken to its core. Ah. Stop it. Leave me alone, was the female childlike cries of the little blonde red-haired girl in the mirror. Her pleas for mercy unheard as the people attacking her didn't stop. The girl was at the age of 5 and had long golden with red streaked hair. She wore nothing but rags and had 3 whisker marks on each sides of her face. Her eyes were that of the purest blue. It was like staring into an ocean. Though her body looked malnourished beyond possibility, wounds and injuries could be seen among other things. Her face itself was bleeding as tears freely roamed down her pudgy face. No. Demon scum. You'll pay for you've done. Feel the pain from your betters, shouted a drunk shinobi as civilian and shinobi alike beat and abused the little child. Beer bottles, weapons, kunai, senbon, shuriken and worst of all katanas. The 3 all watched this in emotions going throughout their bodies. Mito was trembling in anger, sadness and most of all hate. Her form trembled and shook as tears fell from her furious eyes as her shoulders and arms shook with each passing hit that was upon the little child. Kushina herself was more on the verge of a breakdown. Her face was formed into the shape of horror and anger mixed in. Her eyes were glistening in anger yet terror for the child. Her arms were wrapped around herself as she watched the scene of the little girl, her own daughter, be tortured. Her daughter's pleas for mercy rang through her ears clear as day. She felt so horrible she wasn't there to help her, keep her safe like a mother should and tell her it was okay. By Kami. I'm the worst mother. Naruto himself though was acting strange. His eyes were full on the scene with a strange look in his eyes as his right hand trembled and twitched every so often. His mouth twitched a bit like he was about to growl or snarl something bad. He slowly, ever so slowly, raised his right hand and looked between it and the child in the mirror. Kushina, isn't the secret of being a Jinchuriki supposed to be kept secret? Which he got his answer from Kushina when she all but nodded. Then, what the hell am I seeing? His words so cold that it made the 2 involuntarily shiver. With that he looked at his right hand once more. The hand that touched Kushina's swollen, pregnant belly. The same one that felt the many excited kicks from the unborn child. The same one that rubbed and played the little touch and kick game the child acted. He looked upon the child once more to see her tears pouring from her eyes, her pleas of mercy, her cries of pain, her yells of anguish. With that Naruto's right hand quickly clenched as he looked up at the red sky of hell and spoke. Do you see it now, Kami? Are you that blind or ignorant of your creations? Your precious mortals, look at what they are doing to their savior. They are torturing her, a child, an innocent soul with not a touch of sin in her body. If you won't do something about this, he said as his eyes glowed purple as the ground beneath his cracked and shook. Kushina and Mito looked upon him in confusion as his Yukai energy was rising. And fast. Somebody, help me, please, was the final pleas from Naruki. The choked back sobs of Mito, the cries and mutters of Kushina finally set him off. Like a damn bomb. His eyes then gained an even more sinister glow before his mouth formed into a demonic snarl as his body just flashed with his rising energies. Then I will. For those pathetic fools do not deserve such a gift. Within Naruto broke. An ancient feeling of power rose up into Naruto. His eyes glowed and flashed purple, showing no sign of pupils before the thin sign of a demonic slit for a pupil formed in his eyes. His body erupted in just pure black Yukai with purple streaks here and there, his body hidden from sight and those of his 2 worried slaves. All across hell, many could feel the massive Yukai energy build up, for it was just too gigantic to ignore. The sudden explosion of pure black and purple streaked Yukai which erupted into the skies of hell itself could be seen by all of hell. The massive ball of Yukai which got bigger and bigger by each second made a few so uneasy they would lose control of their bladders or just die from the sudden expulsion of such Yukai. The ground shook, the mountains trembled and crumbled, the sea of blood itself boiled, the sky itself looked as if it was about to shatter all on them. That's when all that yukai, all that power that was just so unimaginable just condensed, making the ball of energy shrink further and further as the wild and chaotic demonic energy now did something even more terrifying. It got stronger, passing the demonic titans themselves in power. It towered over all in hell, making many just feel like an insect in comparison. That's when many saw it. A giant shadow loomed all over hell, the source of it being exactly where the explosion occurred. Only when its form shifted and showed its true appearance did many freeze in petrifying terror. For in front of them all was a crimson-eyed apparition, it being passing the red sky itself looming over hell. It could be seen that the apparition was demonic in nature. No, demonic isn't the right word. What is the right word is hellish, nightmaringly terrifying. It had a maw filled with glowing purple giant razor-sharp teeth which seemed to look as if it could tear through the hardest of divine metal. Curved horns stuck out of its head going past its forehead in a curved pattern. The wings of this thing were massive, they all but overshadowed hell, the sea of blood, even the mountains themselves. But the eyes, oh Kami, the eyes, it was like staring into the eyes of a wrathful god. The avatar of death looked to be just within those very eyes. They glowed crimson yet was so full of bloodlust and vengeance that it made many want to actually pray to Kami herself for forgiveness. Deep within a castle, Lucifer himself sensed the very powerful, even godlike energy explosion. Looking out, he saw the one thing that made him scowl. "This is your doing, isn't Hellwing?" he said, spitting out the name like it was pure venom. That's when he heard the sound of someone walking from behind him. So this is Naruto's power. Lucifer, you never told me he was this powerful, was the seductive voice of Lilith. Her purple-skinned body imperfect is her seductive smile that could make any mortal man just bow before her. Her eyes glistened in excitement yet curiosity as her set upon the apparition that which loomed over the castle itself. Grunting, Lucifer spoke. "He's been hiding this from me all this time. All our battles, all our fights. He's held back against me. How dare he?" He yelled as his own demonic energy blasted from him. Lilith herself just stayed where she was as her eyes danced with amusement at Lucifer's outrage. Though her eyes did shift once more to the apparition and she licked her lips as her body trembled and shivered in excitement. I wonder how our first meeting will be. Hellwing. Explosion site. Kushina and Mito both looked on at the apparition that appeared in the sky with something akin to fear yet amazement as they beheld the sight before them. The power, it was so amazing it rose up above the demon titans and they were pretty sure by now was up to par with the deities. Though that's when the apparition started to shrink. It condensed smaller and smaller until it got all the way down into the crater. The crater itself looked as if you could place the sea of blood itself within. It was enormous. Only when the apparition reached the very bottom did they see what become of their master. And they did somewhat, for his figure looked shadowy at best, but it struck fear into their hearts when they saw the demonic glowing purple eyes of the shadow loom onto them. Their breath hitched when its gaze fell upon them. They truly felt like nothing to this being. This power was so monstrous. That's when the shadow itself sinked into Naruto's body, showing their master in all his glory, but the wrathful look in his eyes and the power behind them and coming off his body showed something happened within him. Something ancient, something powerful awoke and made him snap. His power was at least tenfold of what was before. It was like the proverbial dam that held back his true power cracked and broke after being hit with its last hit. His body was just seeping out yukai and waves upon waves of his power came off of him. His clothes blew in the wind as did his hair. The purple glow of his eyes flashed with so much anger that it made the two flinch. Kushina. Mito. It's time we paid a little visit to Ningenkai. The demonic tone in his voice made them both shiver in what they didn't know, but there was one thing that was for sure. Their master was beyond irritated now. They have never ever seen him so angry before. But now his eyes just glowed in many emotions that was shocking to be in the eyes of such a unemotional devil. There was many emotions they saw, anger, hate, vengeance, but the noticeable of all was wrath, pure wrathful fury that of any could bring forth. But when they remembered the words he spoke, they stood up still, a bit shaken at the state of their master, and jumped to his side. Why yes, Naruto-sama, they uttered stiffly, nodding. Naruto just snapped his fingers before a crimson demonic circle appeared below them. The demonic language too difficult for either of them to even comprehend, and right then they were enveloped from below by a reddish glow as the flames of hellfire erupted around them. Soon their bodies were fully covered before they all sunk into the circle, disappearing along with the circle itself, leaving a giant cratered yukai-infested land. Ningenkai Konohagakure no Sato. Running on the streets on Konoha on her small legs was Naruki, her fear-stricken face with tears running down her eyes. Mobs upon mobs of civilian and shinobi alike chasing her down with insane grins upon their face, with a murderous look in their eyes. Many wielded weapons of all kinds, many were just in pure glee at being able to hurt the demon. Running around a corner, she slowed her pace to catch her breath. Blood fell from her arms and legs as tears fell on the cement ground. Why? Why her? Why was she the one bearing this kind of injustice? It was so painful. Not having any parents to keep her safe, protected, being alone as she was, with her only friend being the voice inside her head. Why? What have I done? Why? Her childish voice strained from all the painful screaming she's done, from the beatings she's gotten from the people of the village she lived in. Hey, I found the demon. This way. Her eyes widened in terror before looking back to see the running mob, and right then turned around and ran as fast as she could, hoping and praying she could get away with not getting injured badly this time. Unluckily, fate wasn't on her side, for when she ran into the main street of Konoha was her eyes snapping open in horror. For all around her was the many mobs of armed civilians and shinobi alike, all wearing that same sick grin. Looking back, hoping for an escape, she saw to her fading hope that the mob chasing her had surrounded her as well. Quivering a bit, she did the only thing she could do, or of what she only knew what to do. And that was to get on the ground and huddle, hoping the beating would end. Tears fell from her eyes when she heard the many advancing footsteps of the giant mob and their plans to make her scream. Huddling even more, she whimpered, "Someone, anyone, help me, please." Her prayer in some way was answered when she heard the many gasps from the mob, and after a while, not feeling any pain, she opened her eyes slightly to see something amazing before her, for below her was the slight reddish glow of something she couldn't identify. Akemi within her mind suddenly gasped. My Kami-sama. This is a teleportation circle. Used by only those of the strongest of demons. Akemi ne-chan. Akemi didn't get to answer her, for the shouts of outrage from the populace rang in her ears. The demon. It's doing something, quick it. Hurry. And the shinobi did, or at least tried to, only for them, to the growing horror of many. Upon getting within an inch inside the faintly glowing red circle, did their bodies suddenly combust in strangely colored flames as their screams erupted from their mouths, echoing all around Konoha. Their flesh melted, as did their eyes. Their bones turned to nothing but dust and ash. Wow, was Naruki's amazed thought as she watched her attacker only bead before her eyes in the most in her eyes breathtaking way possible. What none saw, though, was that the sky itself was turned blood red in color as black lightning started to dance across the sky. The reddish circle around Naruki glowed even more before it started to show strange runes and language none could even hope to decipher. What's happening? Was the words of a terrified civilian. He never got his answer, since the sound of static could be heard before. To all of their horror and Naruki's growing amazement, did the ground start to tremble and shake like a coming earthquake, making many buildings fall and crumble, and civilians all but fall deep within the cracks made by the shaking. That is when they thought it was over, was when the same fires thatted the two shinobi suddenly erupted from the cracks, incinerating any that were near the cracks on the ground. Buildings also randomly started to implode in a hellfire blaze. That which lit up the now waking village of Konoha. Only then, when the sound of lightning, did one person look up only to scream. What the sky, it's red. Many looked up to, indeed to their fear, see a blood-red sky filled with pitch-black lightning. Naruki looked at the sky in awe before she heard something from behind her. Slowly looking behind, she saw something which looked like that strange fire start to rise. That's when, to the awe of Naruki and Akemi's tense silence, did these three sparks of hellfire suddenly open up before the sounds of many upon many bats filled the air, getting the attention of the crowd. Following the bats that circled where they came out of, in a column did a red light come out of all three fire holes. That's when, to the horror and fear of the crowd, did the one thing none expected to come out. It was humanoid shapes, of what seemed to be humans, that which were covered in bats from head to toe. The taller of the two only a foot away from Naruki. When they all came out completely did the bat skin crack with crimson lines which glowed faintly. The cracks got more frequent before suddenly the crowd was blown back into the air and yards away from where they stood. Only strangely enough, Naruki was still where she was, her eyes wide and filled with awe and wonder at what she was seeing. For she was seeing two of the most prettiest ladies she's ever saw. Their red hair looked so soft and silky she wanted to touch it. The one, though, with longer red hair was strangely smiling at her. No way. If they're here, then that means. Naruki heard her but turned her gaze at the last person that stood right in front of her. His imposing statue made her shiver. His glowing purple eyes were looking all on Konoha, making her just think Konoha would just implode by his gaze alone. She wondered, though, who these people were and if they were also gonna hurt her. The thought made her tremble. Naruto himself, after looking around Konoha in just pure distaste, did give a glance down at Naruki, making her break into a shaking mess. When he saw the wounds and blood on her body, made him clench his fist tighter before he looked up at all the squirming humans before him. He could smell their fear, their hatred, and, to his disgust, the disgusting smell of urine. The fools all but soiled themselves. Pathetic child. His words echoing all around the area, Naruki hesitantly looked up at him, seeing his imposing figure. Why, yes, sir. Naruto just walked past her and spoke. Go to your mother. You two have been separated long enough and your reunion has been long overdue. His words made her go wide-eyed before he looked back to see Kushina smiling at her. Tears were falling from her eyes, as were Naruki's. Ka-san. Her voice in nothing more than a quiver of hope, hoping what she was seeing was true and not one of her many dreams and not a false reality. Kushina smiled warmly at Naruki before she crouched down and spread out her arms. Naruki-chan, come here. That's all the little girl needed before she ran to Kushina and practically jumped into her arms before bursting into tears. Ka-san, you're here. She could tell, even if she never met her mother before, that this woman was her mother. She could feel it deep within her. This pretty woman was her mother. Kushina just let a lone tear fall from her eye as she held Naruki in her arms. Mito kneeled beside her and smiled at the family reunion. That is until she and Naruto heard the humans getting their bearings once more. Who are you? And why are you helping that demon? Shouted a shinobi. Mito just glared a mortal before Naruto himself just gave the man a glance before speaking. I do not speak with the likes of your kind. Now die like the pathetic filthy mortal you are. With that, Naruto pointed his hand outward at the mob of shinobi and civilian alike and spoke. Kushina, stay with her. Mito, stay with them. Who knows when heaven's forces will be here, as darkness started to shroud his stretched out arm. Sensing he wouldn't take a no like she would give him a no anyways, nodded and stayed by Kushina and Naruki's side. Besides, she could feel that Naruto wanted to release some pent-up anger. It was always such a good show when her master always. Good then. Now, let the slaughter begin. With that he gave a glance at the terrified mob and snarled. Die. Bakuhatsu no Yami no Bakuden, exploding darkness bomb, with that the event which would be counted in history as the most bloodiest of massacres commenced. A orb of darkness shot from Naruto's hand and right at the mob of humans, shinobi and civilian alike. Clan members or council members. All were obliterated in a monstrous wave of pure darkness. The wave consumed all in its path, taking multiple buildings along with part of its walls. The blast was so enormous it gained the attention of every shinobi in Konoha, which all raced to where it came from. Naruki though watched with what she dubbed Naruto as the scary man, did and was in a state of awe. Kushina just smiled and held her daughter closer when she saw her eyes at the scene of what Naruto had just done. For before Naruto's outstretched hand was a mob of civilians was nothing more than ash. A giant trench of the explosion's size showed stretching on for miles to miles on end. Spitting on the ground, Naruto's face contorted into plain disgust before he just turned around and spoke. Quit your hiding and come on out, you pathetic ninja. So with that, all around Naruto did multiple shadows of shinobi pop out, many Junin and Anbu. The numbers were quite many, but, to him, it wasn't even a warm-up. Taking a step forward he spoke as his demonic aura flared from all around him, cracking the ground and shattering the building walls around him. Let this be put into the history books, let all of Ningenkai and heaven itself know, that Konohagakure no Sato, has its first ever massacre. With that Naruto all but, jumped at the shocked shinobi. They never saw what came next. Grasping one shinobi's head, he let out a snarl before snapping it. His snarl turned into a cruel cold smirk when he saw the terror-widen eyes. He looked at the charging shinobi and grunted. Twisting the head even more, he ripped it off, spraying blood like a fountain all over the approaching shinobi before he planted the disembodied head into a sneaking from behind him shinobi into the face, shattering his mask, and practically with just force alone fused the head into the other's cracking and shattering skulls. Spinning around, slammed his foot into the ground before cracks came from the ground and, to many of their horror, hellfire suddenly shot up, incinerating them along with buildings around them. Pointing his right hand out in a strange position he spoke. Haru. Titan no Kobushi, hellfire. Titan's fist, and to the horror of many a giant hellfire Titan-sized fist formed over Konoha's civilian district. It being the size of Kyuubi herself. Once it touched the ground, half of Konoha's village was destroyed by a massive explosion of hellfire. The ball of flame evaporated and destroyed all it touched. None were spared, children, civilian or shinobi. None were spared. Men, women and children alike were not spared. His wrath, soon the corpses of the dead littered the ground while some were screaming as their flesh melted from their body from the intense heat. Wow. Naruto-sama isn't pulling any punches. Mito said as she watched the fiery ball of doom light up the blood-red sky. She watched as Naruto just gave a cold chortle as he butchered more vengeful shinobi. Kushina just nodded as Naruki kept her gaze on Naruto's form in what seemed like some kind of remembrance of some sort. His cloak billowing in the wind and smoke, Naruto's glowing malevolent eyes cut through the smoke of fire and sulfur like butter. Around him were multiple mutilated bodies of shinobi dead in their own way. The sound of dripping was heard, for upon Naruto's outstretched hand was a dead body of a Uchiha hanging off his arm. His hand shot through his skull. Waving his arm he slid off the Uchiha before looking to his right. Another force of shinobi, foolish. With that he faced his to the right and spoke. Akuma Magiku. Jigoku no Kokaku Shu, demon magic. skeletal hands of hell, and before the awe and amazement of the Uzumakis behind him did a rupture upon the ground crack open. Right then a group of shinobi appeared above it. Naruto smirked as he watched their faces form from hate and anger to horror and fear as skeletal hands coated in flames of hell shot out, pulled them down, formed the air and into the rupture. Ah! The fire! Ah! Oh sweet Kami! The pain! Ah! What are these things? Wait, no. The last one silenced via by the bone hand crushing his skull in. Naruto just smirked cruelly and relished in the sounds of the humans' scream and pleas of mercy as their flesh and bones burned and turned to ash by the fires of hell. He watched them be pulled into the rupture with satisfaction in his eyes. That is when he sensed to his ire another forcing coming from his left, only a chakra signature higher than the others were with them. Bursting out of the streets were shinobi upon shinobi, leading them were Anbu of the highest level, and before them were the shinobi clan heads of Konoha. Finally was the one that made Mito have a twitch in the eyebrow. It was Senju Tsunade, granddaughter of Tobarama Senju and Godime Hokage of Konohagakure. Her amber eyes were filled with anger and distaste at the being before them who had destroyed so much of their village. With her were the clan heads of every clan in Konoha garbed and ready for battle, though Naruto just ignored their presence and spoke. Pathetic. If this is how strong Ningenkai has to offer, then I'm sorely disappointed, his uncaring gaze shifting back to his normal uncaring one. This seemed to irritate the shinobi that were ignored by him, and Tsunade spoke on their behalf. Who are you? And why have you done this? Which Naruto just gave her a glance, but it was enough to send her into hysterics when his purple demonic eyes set its gaze upon her. Soon an overwhelming feeling of pure demonic energy washed over her, making her shiver in petrifying terror. Snarling at how pathetic the woman was, he turned around, raised his hand up into the air. Pathetic mortals, witness the very bringer of your home's slaughter, before looking over his shoulder, showing his glowing slitted eye. Before anyone could say anything or utter a single word, Naruto spoke. Haru. Varajingu Ryusei Shawa, Hellfire. Blazing meteor shower. Right then all watched as the loud rumbling sound could be heard. Looking around, they suddenly looked up to see, to the Konoha shinobi's horror and Tsunade's terror, hellfire engulfed meteors coming down on them, they being the size of medium-sized buildings. Grinning at their terror, he walked back to Mito and Kushina as Naruki was still being held in Kushina's arms, but her eyes were glued upon the sky in pure awe. Watch. Konoha shall burn. Let this be a sign, for all of Ningenkai. His demonic words made Naruki snap out of her stupor and look up at Naruto's form, but when she did, she never felt a pang of hurt come to her head before a flash blinded her vision. What she saw was Naruto kneeling over Kushina, his hand rubbing over her stomach, his purple eyes shined in a somewhat amused light. She looked upon him, memorizing his eyes and face before the light dissipated, before showing she was back where she was before, in the arms of her revealed mother. When she looked back up at Naruto, who at the moment was watching in great pleasure of the mortals before him scream and yell in fear. Mito walked up beside him and spoke with her eyes glaring at Tsunade. Naruto-sama, allow me to handle these fools. He just gave her a glance and nodded before disappeared in nothing but a blur. Appearing in front of the shinobi, she slammed her foot into the ground, shaking the area while making a few shinobi stumble, but it did get the attention of all of them. Though when they saw her, many went gob-smacked, or in Tsunade's case into complete shock. Mito-sama, her voice showing shock yet awe for seeing the legendary woman herself. Mito just cast a glance to Tsunade before sneering. Don't. Mito-sama, me Senju. I can already guess what you've done, Tsunade, as your time as Hokage, and to do such things to Naruki, you're as low as your pathetic family. Her words full of venom, since she could tell that Tsunade had done something to reveal Naruki was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, which led to her being abused and hated. Tsunade flinched at her words and tried to speak only to be silenced via Mito appearing in front of her, with her being held in the air by Mito's hand wrapped around her neck in a steel-like grip. Her feet dangled off the ground as she tried to desperately lessen the grip. Only for Mito to grip tighter. Now, Senju, watch masters work on your pitiful village, watch as your foolish family's creation is reduced to nothing more than a smoldering crater. With that, she turned Tsunade in the direction of the blazing meteors and made her watch in horror as the flaming rocks came upon impact with the ground. Boom! Konoha lit up like a Christmas tree as multiple spheres of hellfire sprouted, all in Konoha destroyed it, ending all in its wake. Screams could be heard as civilians and shinobi alike ran around, their bodies lit on fire, with them too falling on the ground, leaving nothing behind but ash. Buildings were nothing but dust in the wind, leaving nothing but smoldering dirt. Ash, dust and smoke blew in the wind as the echoes of screams and yells of humans rang through Konoha, as well as the cries of children. Tsunade watched it all as tears fell from her eyes before Mito uncaringly threw her into a building, with it collapsing all on her. With that done, she spat on the ground before turning to her master and walked to his location. The shinobi that watched the scene just saw red and charged in blind fury, only to make their last mistake. Fools! Akuma Magiku, Saoryu Sheisei Doroganzu, demon magic, soul-eating dragons, and to the horror of the shinobi, a dark circle appeared behind Mito, and in a blink, multiple black dragons shot out with their maws wide open. Too late to react, their mouths flew open in a silent scream as the dragons shot onto them. Never breaking stride, she walked over to the others and bowed her head at Naruto, which he just nodded before she got Kushina's side once more. Naruto himself looked around, seeing no others coming for them, then suddenly he looked up in the sky and frowned. So they send him? Quite desperate they are. They heard his words and looked at him questioningly before they saw him looking up. Doing the same thing, Naruki gasped, as did Kushina and Mito. For a bright hole opened up, splitting up the crimson sky before a figure could be seen floating down. Naruto just frowned when he was confirmed of who it was. When it was clear to see who it was a man. He was tall, around the 6 feet 5 stature, but everything else was cloaked under a massive black cloak, with ripped ends at the end. His face as well was covered with only his glowing white eyes shone with themselves, showing boredom. But the real eye-catcher was the angelic wings upon his back. They were spread out in a 15-foot span, with them being a dull gray in color. Finally was the giant Zanbato strapped to his back. Naruto merely stared at the being and spoke. So Kami sends her best of the best when she can barely even keep her own creations in check, isn't that right, Abaddon? His tone changing to a more demonic tone. Said man just looked upon him, his eyes changing from boredom to a joyful yet curious look. Hellwing. Haha. It's been millennia. How are you? Naruto just shook his head at the man's choice of words. His two slaves and Naruki watched on in curiosity. You never change, but then again you wouldn't be Abaddon if you had, which made a glowing white smirk appear on the shadowed man's face. As have you, causing trouble, have we? This made Naruto roll his eyes, that is, until the man's cloaked figure tensed and spoke in a more serious tone. Now, what have you done this time, to enact the wrath of the deities, as a whole this time? Which Naruto just waved off his question in a non-nonchalant manner. Nothing really, just doing a little clean-up, pathetic humans here and there, which made the man's eyes narrow. You mean slaughter? Like this, right? Gesturing at Konoha's smoldering form, shrugging, Naruto gave an uncaring glance. Yeah, you can call it that if you want. I have seen enough of these pathetic humans to know they just aren't worth living. They're nothing but sinful beings of the highest order, you know that as well as I. Abaddon. The man just shook his head in exasperation. True, I will not deny it, but You have angered the court of Kami with this action, Naruto, for you have the child of prophecy in your grasp, and that is something Kami cannot let continue, which Naruto just grunted. Like I care what she thinks, if she's just gonna stand up there and sit upon her throne and watch as a child is beaten, then no, I'll do whatever I like, and I'd like to see anyone trying to stop me, whether they be God or not, his voice gaining a much colder, aggressive tone. None of which Mito and Kushina had ever heard before. Abaddon himself eyed Naruto with a solemn look before he grasped his Zanbato. Then you give me no choice for angering the deities and upsetting the court of Kami. I am ordered to you. Hellwing Naruto. Said devil just gained a grave look and shook his head. You are a fool. With that, Abaddon disappeared along did Naruto. Then, it was like a deadly silence filled the area, and before anyone could utter a word, clang! Naruto and Abaddon appeared in the air with the Zanbato being blocked by Naruto's Nodaichi. They disappeared once more in godly speeds before they appeared once more on the ground, another resulting clash uprooting trees before setting them ablaze. Leaning to the left, Naruto dodged a swipe before giving Abaddon a quick slash across his chest, giving a long gash on his cloak. Said angel just grunted, but before he could retaliate, Naruto was on him even more with much more aggression he thought possible. Moving to the right, he dodged a stab before he felt pain in his stomach. Looking down, he saw Naruto's fist embedded into his stomach. You've gotten slow. With those words, Naruto pulled his fist back, making Abaddon hold his stomach in pain, and before the angel could gain his breath, Naruto brought his Nodaichi out and crouched with his weapon being held in a firm grip. Seeing what Naruto was about to do, Abaddon cursed. Now, I end this. With that in but a mere flash, Naruto appeared behind the angel, his weapon outstretched in a manner indicating it was swung. With that, he stood back up and let his Nodaichi disappeared in a pillar of hellfire. Abaddon stood there before in a blink. Multiple gashes appeared on his cloak as his Zanbato itself broke in two. What the? You were never this strong before. His words came out in a strained tone. Naruto heard his words but ignored them before walking up to him. Grasping his cloak, he spoke with his other hand glowing in a dark aura. Now, go deliver this as a message to Kami and those other fools. If they come after me again, I will make Ningenkai my own personal underworld. Now, be gone from my sight. And become stronger. You've become weak. With that, he threw him into the air before disappearing. Before reappearing in front of Abaddon's suspended body spinning around, he delivered a bone-breaking kick to his ribs. Hearing an audible crack and grunt of pain from him, the angel was sent flying through the air and into the high no Kuni forests, passing through trees at speeds none could possibly comprehend. Seeing him out of the way, Naruto vanished and appeared in front of the three Uzumakis and grunted. Now, let us go. I tire of this place. And the child needs some food, before she dies of starvation. Nodding at his assumption, they all stood up with Naruki held gently in Kushina's arm, but her eyes were still on Naruto's form in akin to awe. Mito looked at her master and still remembered how he talked with the angel in a somewhat friendly manner, thus made her very curious. Naruto-sama. If I may, who was that man? Which the devil just snapped his fingers, making a portal appear as he spoke. He is Kami's strongest of her angels, going beyond that of the Crusader Legion. He in a sense Kami's bounty hunter. He is the Archangel Abaddon, and at one time a fellow acquaintance, but he has let his skills get rusty. That made her raise an eyebrow but didn't push any further, knowing it was her master's past and she didn't need to know too much. Walking out of the dark portal, the party of four walked out from Ningenkai. Leading them all was Hellwing Naruto himself. A perpetual emotionless face portrayed upon his masculine pale face. Beside him was Kushina, his second slave, holding a sleeping Naruki in her arms, her purple eyes seemed to just radiate love and affection for the girl. Mito on his left was looking at the now joined together family. Glancing at her master, she gave him a thankful smile. Naruto felt Mito's gaze on him and looked to his left to see her smiling at him. Rolling his eyes at that, he grunted before moving forward. As he did so, he gave an ever discreet glance at Kushina smothering the little child and couldn't help but feel a small jolt of something strike at his black heart. What it was he didn't know, but he was assuring himself it wasn't anything of what he thought it was. Narrowing his eyes though, he did feel the accumulation of yokai gathering around Naruki and knew they needed to hurry before the child suffered from the drawbacks of being in hell. And, looking around the area of where his outpost and house used to be, he mentally scowled. Looking over at the Uzumakis, he spoke, "Mito, Kushina, come, we must hurry before the yokai affects her. Since the residence is destroyed, we'll be going to my secondary base of operations." He received confused glances from the two women as the little 5-year-old girl just snuggled more into her mother's warmth. Naruto-sama, not to sound rude, but where is this other home? Mito asked, which her devil master just gave her a glance before snapping his fingers, creating a portal once more. Walking toward it, followed by the two, he spoke, "It is located near the volcano of Unmake Doom. Once there, we shall go into the house where we can begin Naruki's transformation." Kushina and Mito nodded at this, knowing the only way for Naruki to live in hell, if she was to be doing so, was to become a demon. They both knew this and didn't quite care. Humanity was all but a disgusting term to them. They honestly couldn't be happier to have chosen the life they had now, especially Kushina as she held her little Masumi in her arms once again. Though what none saw or sensed for that matter was a pair of eyes watching them with pure disgust and hatred for the three devils. Cliff side of the volcano. Stepping out of the portal, Naruto and the group came upon the cliff of one giant volcano, one where the very peak itself reached past the dark blood clouds itself. The two seemed to be marveled at the sight as lava seemed to run down its out shell, somehow separated from the cliff side itself. "Mito, Kushina, stop standing and hurry up." Naruto's voice shook them of their stupors and rushed toward him. Kushina, while following her master, looked down at Naruki only to see to her growing horror her face scrunched up like she was in some sort of pain. The whimpering didn't help it either. Naruto seemed to have heard the small whimpers and appeared beside Kushina with an impatient look in his eyes. "Damn it. The effect of the yokai is spreading faster than I thought. I'm gonna need to improvise," he said before taking Naruki from Kushina's shocked form. Then he looked at both Kushina and Mito. "Follow me." With that, he shot off deep into a cavern within the volcano. Without a second of hesitation, they followed him in. Not knowing what their master was going to do, they never did see a shadow of a being within the darkened cliffside. Within the cavern, Kushina and Mito had both caught up to their master only to see him standing in a runic circle similar to the ones he used on them, only this one being written differently this time. The other thing that was different, that instead of a dead body in the center of the ceiling circle was Naruto himself holding the little girl in his arms. His yokai seemed to slowly seep out of him and into the runes in the arcanic circle. His eyes seemed to glow ever so slowly as his hands held the trembling Naruki. Casting his gaze at the two worried slaves, he spoke in a slightly demonic tone, "Kushina. Mito, things are gonna have to be done differently with the girl's case. It would seem the Biju's yokai within her and the infinite amount of yokai in Makai is slowly tearing her apart on the inside. Her soul itself is being corrupted and soon will either die or she would become nothing more than a bloodthirsty demon." Kushina, hearing this, almost burst into tears. Seeing this, he spoke before she could interrupt him. "Do not worry though. I have another way to fix this, but I will say Naruki won't be human any longer and will become a devil like we are. To counterbalance the yokai coming from within her and the one outside pushing into her, I will need to infuse not only my own yokai into her. But my own blood as well. For you see the power of the yukai I give her would literally tear her apart, no questions asked, but if I were to override her human genes with my blood, it will change her in a devil like myself. Thus her body would survive the transfer. Hearing this, they both had to nod at that. They knew the only way for the little girl to survive was to become a demon. It was a miracle she wasn't already torn apart by the energies within Makai, but both guessed a chemi within her was protecting her in a way, even if it was hurting her a little in the process. Kushina, gaining her words, looked at her master with a determined look in her eyes. Master, please, save my little girl. I don't care what happens, I just want her to live. Where I can hold her in my arms and protect her like I should have done when she was just born. Hearing this, Naruto turned back to the little girl in his arms and sighed. Very well then, Uzumaki Naruki shall be saved from a fate worse than death or hell's torture themselves. Let her be transformed and become my daughter in all but flesh. Let her be born anew. He shouted before his eyes practically lit on fire. Purple flames engulfed his eyes as blood started to pour from his eyes and body. It all but soaking the little girl in his arms and the blood touching the runic circle he stood upon. Looking down at the girl, he set her down in the puddle of blood before he kneeled down at her side and spoke a spell that he had yet to ever and thought he would never use. Akuma Magiku. Akuma no Kai Tenso, demon magic, demonic blood transfer, and with that he placed both his hands on the puddle of his blood. He watched as did Kushina and Mito as blood-red runes appeared in the blood before it stretched toward the shivering body of Naruki. They watched when the runes touched her body. She seemed to stop shivering completely, like she was completely frozen in place as the blood seemed to be soaked into the runes and it flowed into the girl. As it did so, Naruto and the other two could already see the differences happening to her. Her hair seemed to have changed a bit, the red streaks seemed to have grown and the main blonde hair replaced by the red hair. Now her hair resembled Kushina, but golden streaks laid within. Her skin that was the same tone as Kushina's seemed to have gotten a bit paler, like Naruto's own. The whisker marks on her face seemed to fade a bit, but still there, and face seemed to lose some of its tomato-shaped look, but still some there, only a bit less baby fat. As the blood finished going into the frozen form of the changed Naruki, Naruto sighed before he placed his hand upon the girl's head and spoke once more. Now for the last part, to have her actually survive in Makai, she will need not only my blood but some of my devil power to awaken her own devil blood. So when this is finished, she should be just fine. The two nodded and watched with bated breath as they watched their master practically save Kushina's daughter from death and bring her to a new life they knew she would love than the one she had before. Channeling his devil power while condensing it into a much weaker version as to not the child due to overpower, he channeled it through his body and to his hands before he spoke. Akuma Magiku, Akuma no Pawa Tenso, Kakusei, demon magic, demonic power transfer, awakening. With that his hands bursts into purple flames before they traveled to Naruki, engulfing her body. Though the flames didn't harm her, more like it was welcoming her, covering her up like a warm blanket. Plus the comfort showing on the girl's face showed exactly how much she felt comforted at the flames engulfing her body. But soon, they like the blood slipped into her body, most assuredly into her new demonic genes to awaken her devil blood. It seemed to work when he body soon let out a small shockwave, creating a small crater where she laid. Yet it didn't disturb Naruto or the other two Uzumakis in the slightest, though Naruto did raise an eyebrow at the power output she just released. That's interesting. Even if the power level she released was lower than most demons, it was enough. It was around the level of a low mid-class demon before going into the trained demon's Yukai levels. Most demon children never have such power at such an age. He was cut out of his thoughts when he heard a slight murmur under him. Looking down he saw Naruki's face scrunching up before she slowly opened her eyes as only to close them while rubbing her tiny fists in her eyes to get them situated at the sudden little light she seen. Once she opened them again, Naruto did see to his slight surprise her eyes now looked more like Kushina than the azure they once were. They were a mix of his own eyes and Kushina's, a light violet instead of the deep violet Kushina had. Looking up she saw the man that she had dubbed the scary man, looking down at her with an almost impassive face. Blinking rapidly she spoke, Anyo, sir. Where am I? A-A and where's KK Ka-san? She spoke timidly yet with a fire in her tone. Naruto just kept staring at her as he listened to her question, that is before he spoke. It seems I've missed something. Oh, that's right. I need to pull that pest out of you to fully reach your demonic abilities. Naruki blinked confusingly at this while Kushina and Mito's eyes widened knowing what he meant at his words. Somehow sensing their distress like he always does he spoke not looking back at them, do not worry, the girl shall not be harmed in any shape or form, though. I can't say the same for the kitsune within her, his words at the end carrying a slight edge. Nodding knowing she would be okay, Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder and spoke. Child, do not speak, move, for if you do you'll be in more pain than you could possibly imagine, understand? The girl despite her young age understood what he meant, sensing the seriousness in his voice and nodded at him. Curiosity just blazing in her eyes. Seeing this, he nodded before placing his other hand onto her navel before his hand glowed bright purple before he spoke. Akuma no Magiku. Akuma no Chushutsu, demon magic. Demonic extraction, his hand soon blazed once again in purple flames, only now it shaped into a claw of some sort. He then suddenly plunged his hand through Naruki's stomach and into the seal. Though somehow Naruki didn't let out a small whimper of pain. Naruto's eyes were closed in small concentration as his spiritually blazed hand searched the depth of the divine fuinjutsu of Megami before he snapped them open and spoke, "There you are," and with a small flick of his wrist he pulled out his hand and flung his arm outward, sending a red blur away from himself and Naruki. Right then as he did so a red-crimson flash erupted from Naruki's form, blinding Kushina and Mito, but Naruto just cast his gaze at her form. His eyebrow was raised ever so slightly at the development happening before his eyes. Naruki's body hadn't changed, but the new appendages did make him guess. For now a red-crimson fox tail waved past her backside as two crimson fluffy fox ears twitched above her head. Her whisker marks seemed to have deepened a bit, but not so much. Seeing she was fine, he waved his arm and the runic circle soon cracked before breaking away like glass before dissolving into the air in a black smoke. Okay, she should be fine, he said before his gaze shifted toward another occupant inside the cavern. His purple eyes crackling with anger at the sight before him. Kushina and Mito wasted no time and appeared beside the confused Naruki, and before the girl knew it she was pulled into a almost crushing hug by Kushina. She blinked rapidly as she was practically smothered by Kushina. Mito didn't help matters as she too was hugging them both in a great embrace. Seeing struggling futile, she snuggled in her mother's arms, letting a small purr as her ears twitched, as did her new tail. The two saw this and gave Naruto a questioning gaze, to which he grunted, "I'd say it's a side effect of being the Kyuubi's container. Unlike you two, Naruki became a devil differently, and just having the Kyuubi's Yukai still in her even after the extraction, it fused with her genes, making her into a hybrid of a devil and a kitsune," he said with a nonchalant tone. Kushina accepted it without question before she nuzzled her face into her Masumi's hair. As the three Uzumakis stayed together, Naruto's gaze were now dead set upon the figure before him. "Now, what to do with you?" Hearing his words, Kushina and Mito and the slightly awakening Naruki would turn their gazes at him. Only to see what he was talking to, and to their immense shock, it was Akemi. Her form was kneeling on the ground, Her long crimson blood-red hair sprayed out upon her back and ground. Her crimson-slitted eyes showed exhaustion beyond measure as her milky skin looked more pale than usual. Her kimono scuffled a bit from the sudden extraction, but when her eyes soon landed upon Naruto's own purple ones, they soon swelled up in immense fear. Naruto shifting his body to her, he walked up to her with an impassive look on his face. Sensing something wrong, Naruki struggled out of Kushina's arms and ran toward Naruto. As the devil got to Akemi, he suddenly felt a sudden pull on his leg. Slowly looking down, he saw the worried face of the newly transformed Naruki. "Wait, sir. Please don't hurt her. She's my friend. She was my only friend I had and I don't want to lose her. Please let her stay with us." Naruto just kept his impassive stare on the girl before he cast his gaze to Kushina, giving her a pointed gaze. Seeing this, she quickly went to him and kneeled to her daughter and slowly but gently wrapped her arms around her body and pulled her from her master's leg. Even as she clinged as best she could, Kushina wouldn't have it and pulled her daughter away. "No, Ka-san. Let me go, please. She's my fiend and I don't want her hurt," Naruki shouted, thrashing and yelling in her mother's arms. Kushina quickly walked to Mito before she stopped her daughter's thrashing by falling to her knees and hugging her daughter to her, completely letting her small muffled yells be silenced by her chest. When she started to calm down, she looked down at her daughter and gave a sad, tearful smile. "Naruki-chan, can you be a big girl and listen to Ka-san for a moment?" The girl slowly looked at her mother while stopped her thrashing completely. Her eyes swelled up with inevitable tears, them being red and puffy. Giving a small kiss to her forehead, she spoke, "You see, Akemi-chan has done many bad things which have made Naruto-sama very displeased with her. Believe me, I know what you're feeling, for Akemi-chan was my friend also." Hearing this, the little hybrid snapped her gaze at her, tearing up Ka-san, her eyes widening at the realization before she blinked her eyes, trying to erase the tears. She was. Kushina just smiled before nodding. Looking in her daughter's eyes, she spoke, "Yes, she was. In fact, Akemi-chan was my friend just like she was to you. During my time growing up, she was always there for me when no one else was. Sometimes during my life, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here right now. Heck, when she found out about me having you, she was completely ecstatic and was wanting to always meet you." Naruki looked at Kushina, shocked at what she said, and couldn't help for a wide smile to cross her face. That is before the situation come back down on her, but Kushina saw this and continued, "But that's a story for another time. You see, Naruki-chan, there are just some things Akemi-chan has done that must be redeemed in any way that can be done. Naruto-sama has to deal with her in his own way and we can't do anything about this. But she's my friend." Kushina nodded, pulling her daughter even more into an embrace, and spoke softly. "I know, Naruki-chan. I know, but like I said, there is nothing we can do." This caused Naruki to go silent and look worryingly at her savior and her friend. Standing in front of Akemi, Naruto's eyes staring down her own without a shred of hesitation, his body imposing like a wrathful titan, pressing down on Akemi like a monstrous weight pressing down on her. That is before the sound of lightning sounded the area. Looking fearfully, she saw Naruto's left hand crackling with pure black-purple streaked lightning. She could feel the great power condensed within the lightning that was way beyond her understanding. She honestly believed the power was strong enough to the Jubi itself. Depending on who was making the attack, she didn't doubt it. Naruto gave her an unforgiving look as he walked up to her and spoke with his lightning-encased hand inches away from Akemi's head. "Now, Biju, give me one good reason why I should not obliterate you where you stand. For the mockery you have inflicted upon our kind's name, dragging it through the damn mud and allowing yourself, you, the mightiest of the Biju, controlled by mere humans, and not only once but 3 times. his tone sinisterly demonic, which scared the already trembling Akemi even more. The Kitsune Biju couldn't tear her gaze away from the man's eyes, she couldn't help herself but be completely terrified more than she had ever been. I mean, who could blame her? Standing before her reading to completely destroy her was a legend, yet also a nightmare among the demon kind. The mightiest of the demon titans, a individual all demons and even titans feared. The devil of legend said to have created and brought the apocalypse countless times upon hell with his fights against Lucifer. Someone no one wanted as an enemy, for he himself made the deities themselves shake in fury at his name. And right now, that very devil was before her, ready to completely destroy her, and her soul, and send them both to the oblivion. She bowed her head in complete submission, something she never or rarely ever does, for it was against her demonic pride. But when it comes to someone that can you with but a flick of his hand, she didn't give a rat's for her damn pride. Speaking in the most respectful tone she ever used, Akemi spoke, I know, and I know there's nothing that can ever change for the things I've done and let pass. I knew I should have been more careful around humans, especially when I knew they could enslave others, but I never expected to be caught like that. Her words laced with the greatest of honesty and truth. Naruto narrowed his eyes as the potency of the lightning got even stronger. A dark aura started to shroud his body. When she saw this, her eyes widened even more before she practically slammed her head to the ground, bowing before the devil that held her life in his hands, literally so. She spoke with the utmost pleading and truth that it shocked the three Sadandu Uzumakis. But I really want to make amends for all the mistakes I've made, even if it would take me countless years. I want nothing more than to make amends for my past failures. I swear it to you on my demon honor and every 9 of my kitsune tails. This made Naruto raise an eyebrow in slight curiosity. It was a known fact, the kitsune can never break a promise no matter what it was. By swearing on her tails, she was declaring how much she would sacrifice to make up for her mistakes. Not only swearing on her demon honor but her tails as well. This is a interesting development. Looking into her eyes, he spoke, and what, pray tell, do you have that I could honestly want? And it best be good, lest your soul be obliterated right now. He kept the lightning encased hand near her face to strengthen his words. It did its job to make the kitsune tremble even more in fright. I'm willing to become your slave for eternity, her words leaving her mouth filled with desperation and honesty. Naruto narrowed his eyes on at the words she just uttered. To speak such things, her, a weakling, become his slave. That was an insult. He'd have nothing to do with a slave that was as weak as she was. She was a mockery to the whole demonic race. Since if a pathetic fleshbag of a human can control her with a weak little bloodline, then a demon could do so with but a swift of their hand. Akemi seemed to hear his thoughts and spoke, even more desperation and fear lacing her tone, with even shockingly enough tears starting to escape her eyes. I know I'm weak right now, but I want nothing more than to regain my worth, and if you would be willing to help me regain my true powers, then I would be ever so much more useful to you. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He knew what she was speaking about when she said, true powers. She was saying she would become the Jubi. She was speaking about devouring her siblings, the other 8 Biju, and becoming the new Jubi. Then again, the first Jubi was just a power-hungry fool that couldn't control his own power and became a slave to that pathetic sage. He thought before he looked down at the trembling form of Akemi before he spoke. That would be interesting. If you were to devour your siblings and become the new Jubi, you would most certainly become much stronger than you are now. Akemi gained a small flicker of hope that started to build in her stomach, only for it be squashed down when he spoke again. But you should know, the previous Jubi couldn't hold a candle to Lucifer. His elites are generals but also Yami's guardians. And now they're 10 times stronger than back then. At best all you can really do if you were to become Tajubi, and that's if you can control that power, you'd only be able to at best defeat some of Lucifer's rebel field commanders, since the quality is quite low these days, he said while awaiting her response, and if he didn't like it then there would be one less Biju alive. Akemi nervously swallowed the lump in her throat as she bit her lip, frantically thinking of what she could do before an idea popped into her mind. What if I ate their hearts? Her answer all but a shaky one that would seem so unseemly to be said from her, the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Now this got his attention. Looking down at her, the potency of the lightning seemed to lessen, as did his dark aura, making her able to breathe a bit easier. Whose heart do you speak of? Interest and curiously in his tone. Akemi looked a bit hopeful now, hoping she was getting a second chance. The generals, the elites of Lucifer and Yami's guardians and chosen ones. Her answer made him quirk an eyebrow at her words. Before he stared deep into her eyes, into breaking contact for a good few minutes. Unlike him, Akemi was having a very hard time keeping contact with his eyes, for the overwhelming power he excluded made her so very weak in the knees, and her demonic instincts just screaming at her that this was the ultimate alpha. He stared at her before he spoke. As you are now, their Yukai would rip you to shreds in just a few seconds. Now if you were to become the Jubi and stronger than the previous, many times stronger, since we both know the first Jubi was weak and couldn't control his power due to his immense bloodlust, which soon swallowed him whole and became nothing more than a mindless beast before he somehow gained entrance to Ningenkai, and, you know the rest, how he became a slave to that sage and split its power. Now tell me, can you, unlike the first, handle the power if the Jubi and getting stronger along the way, or will you become a mindless beast the same as the first Jubi? His words cutting deep into Akemi's soul. The Kitsune lowered her head as she thought for a moment, which didn't take very long when she snapped her face up to him. Her crimson-slitted eyes that were once filled with fear and nervousness were now just flowing with determination. Her gaze standing strong with his own. For you, your lordship, I will and shall endure even worse than that, and in your name I will become stronger and not let the power consume me and bind me like my predecessor. That I swear utterly and completely. Her words rang true. Staring her down, Naruto could see she was speaking the complete truth. Then with a slight twitch of his wrist he flicked his hand away, canceling the lightning around his hand. His aura diminishing, allowing Akemi to breathe all the easier. The Uzumakis that watched looked ever so hopeful at what he was gonna do. The little girl Naruki looked the most hopeful out of them all. Turning around slightly, he looked over his shoulder and gave her a expecting gaze. Very well then, prove to me how much you're willing to go. Prove to me you want to get stronger, and if you should impress me, then you will be spared and become my slave, he said before looking back at the Uzumaki women. Walking up to them, ignoring the thankful look Akemi was giving him, he spoke with a commanding tone that made the three freeze. Mito in the field, show me what exactly she's capable of and do not hold back, making her know he wanted her to not hold anything back. Even if the Biju is a friend, she isn't to hold anything back on her. Mito bowed slightly before heading toward Akemi, an impassive look on her face that conveyed how much she was mentally thanking her master for giving Akemi one chance. Walking up to Kushina and Naruki, he turned around and watched the fight about to come. When he felt two pair of eyes on him, though, he briefly looked down to see the thankful pair of violet eyes of Kushina and the happy giddy ones of Naruki. Kushina was quickly up on her feet when her master was right beside her. That didn't mean she relinquished Naruki from her arms. As the three watched Mito and Akemi get ready, Kushina cast her gaze to her master every so often and back to the front. She couldn't help but feel even more happy of being the slave of someone like him, even if he was close to Akemi. She sighed in a silent content while ever so slowly inching a bit closer to him before inwardly making Naruto stiffen, leaning her head onto his shoulder, thus making him widen his eyes slightly while Naruki watched the action curiously. Looking down at the redhead leaning on his shoulder, Naruto narrowed his eyes as that jolt came back and in full force as well. Honestly, he didn't know what it was and it was starting to irritate him. But he honestly felt compelled to not push Kushina off him and threaten if she did that again he'd her. It was like something was forcing him down, telling him to just let her do what she was doing. He let out a sigh and continued to watch the battle that bound to happen. He never saw the wide smile on Kushina's face or the blush on her face that could make a tomato look deathly pale. She thought when she did this he'd push her away instantly, but, to her immense shock, he didn't. He was letting her lean on him. More so, the way he shifted a bit, allowing her head to comfortably rest between his shoulder and chest, made it all the more better for her. She sighed once more, this time feeling the overall warmth coming from her master, which blanketed her body like a warm blanket, a blanket that would protect her and Naruki from the cold. Briefly looking at her daughter, she saw her slight surprise that she was asleep right then, quietly snuggling into her more and more. "Naruto-sama, thank you for giving her this chance," she muttered, to which he just grunted. "It still depends, Kushina. If she cannot impress me with fighting Mito, then she shall not get this chance. It all depends if she is willing to go beyond everything to get stronger and make amends for the mistakes she's made. If not, she will die no matter what." She just nodded, knowing it was absolute. His word was law to them and knew it couldn't be broken no matter how much you didn't want it to be so. So Kushina just closed her eyes for a moment, enjoying herself from feeling herself leaning against her master. She then opened her eyes to watch the battle that was about to begin. Very well then, master. With Mito and Akemi standing on opposite ends, Mito and Akemi eyed each other as they stood ready to fight one another. Mito eyeing her former prisoner with an impassive look as our demonic aura started to leak off her and shroud her body in a crimson-purple aura. As Akemi gave her a stare filled with determination and the will to win, something that made her mentally smile at. Akemi, letting loose her demonic power, made her appendages come out with 2 long crimson fox ears and 9 flowing fox tails flow from out her backside. The whiskers on her face deepened till they literally became real. Her hands soon became claws as fangs protruded from her mouth. Mito, seeing Akemi was ready, spoke. "Now Akemi, let's see how willing you're ready to go, to impress master." With that, Mito pulled out her hands and before speeding toward Akemi, the Biju doing the same. Her purple eyes glowing as Akemi's own crimson doing the same. Once they appeared inches from each other, it signaled the fight had begun. Boom! A explosion of smoke and dust erupted as Mito and Akemi struggled with a headlock grasp. Their hands grasping the others in a ever-tightening grip. They stood firm on the cracking ground as each held their ground. Mito looking impassive as ever as Akemi struggled to keep her stance, since Mito's overwhelming strength was pushing hers down quickly. Reacting quickly, she had one of her tails coming from her left, coming from behind Mito's guard and swatting her away and into the cavern walls. Not letting up, she charged right at the silent as ever Mito, only to stop when she felt a sudden impact hit her stomach. Looking down, she saw Mito's foot slammed into her stomach. Not able to let out a sound, she was sent flying into the opposite wall, thus cracking it as rubble started to fall around her. She was still trying to wave off the hit she felt that knocked the air right out of her, only to see a pair of glowing purple eyes converge right on her. "Don't let up or you will lose, Akemi," was Mito's only warning before her hand grasped Akemi's face before she swung right past her master and Kushina, making the wind blow past them, making their hair blow back as she sped past them after her target. Naruki was still amazingly asleep throughout it all. Kushina blinked slowly while Naruto just turned around and walked toward where the battle would be taking place. Kushina beside him, instantly holding her child in her arms. Looking at her master, she spoke. "Seems this is gonna get a bit rowdy, don't you think so, Naruto-sama?" she said while inwardly pouting at not able to lean on him again. She was enjoying that, damn it. Looking to Kushina, he sighed. It is of no trouble, no demon would dare come to this volcano, and besides, the level of Yukai that is gonna be used here will vaporize many lower level demons, he said, to which she nodded in understanding. Before they walked out of the entrance to the cavern before looking down to continue watching the fight. Knowing it was gonna be quite the hectic fight. With Akemi and Mito skidding on the mountainside, Akemi snarled before she looked up to see Mito coming down like a missile. Reacting quickly, she crouched before jumping away. As she did, Mito practically slammed right into the mountainside, making the area shake as a pillar of smoke shot into the air. It quickly disappeared, showing Mito crouching on the ground, her fist implanted into the ground, a crater all around formed by her fist. When she snapped her eyes to Akemi, they glared, as did her own crimson ones. With that, both disappeared only to appear in the air again, clashing, their clashes making small shockwaves erupt from them, making the ground crack and shatter, boulders explode and dead trees uproot. It soon ended when Mito punched Akemi in the stomach before giving her a spin kick to the head, sending into the ground, creating yet another crater. Not letting up, Mito shot down toward Akemi, readying her hands once more. Only when the smoke cleared did her eyes widen slightly when she saw Akemi gathering Yukai into her claws. Glaring at her oncoming target, Akemi concentrated her Yukai into her claws before shouting, "Kitsune Oni no Sume." Fox Demon Claw. Soon both her claws were engulfed in a crimson fire-shaped claw before she swung both her arms toward Mito, making them shoot toward her like a speeding missile. Seeing them come, Mito silently cursed before quickly moved in the sky, avoiding the flaming claws. Getting irritated with her maneuvering, Akemi moved them once more onto Mito, which she dodged once more, only to the Uzumaki's surprise another pair of flaming claws shoot out of the first pair, which soon grasped her body in a dual grip. And with a grin, swung her arms down, which the flaming claws soon followed. "Take this, Mito," she screamed before slamming the Devil Empress into the ground, splitting it like a small earthquake as a medium-sized ravine appeared. Yet again another crater formed. Only this time, as Akemi glared into the smoke, she suddenly felt her fire claws start to turn gray. Seeing this happen, her eyes widened before canceling the technique. Good thing she did, because once she did, the fire-engulfed claws soon became nothing but stone, which soon cracked and shattered, turning to dust that flowed in the wind. "That was good, now keep going," was the words that whispered into her ear. Spinning around, she was quick enough to dodge or guard against the incoming punch was planted into her face, making it cave in itself. Not stopping, Mito slammed her other hand into Akemi's stomach, making the Biju gasp before coughing up blood. Mito didn't let up before grabbed Kyubi by one of her tails and swung her around before letting her missile through and ram into a couple of dead trees, which she soon followed in, since now Akemi was inside the forest of dead trees. Through it all, Naruto's scanning, calculating eyes moved from one end to another, watching the fight with a calculative eye. In the forest, Akemi panted, her hair cascading over her eyes. She had a hand on a tree as she regained some air. As she did so, her mind thought a mile a second as to how to fight Mito, who she knew was much stronger than her. "But I won't give up. His lordship is giving me a second chance. I promised I'll do anything, and I damn well meant it." With a renewed vigor, Akemi narrowed her eyes before twisting around, blocking a kick from Mito. She stood her ground, but the ground behind her didn't, for it uprooted behind her, shattering and cracking. Her long blood-red hair billowed in the wind before she grasped Mito's foot before swing her up before slamming her into the ground. She didn't stop there. After letting go of her legs, she grasped her head and started to repeatedly slam her face into the ground. With each hit made the ground gain a bigger crater with each one. A multiple sound of banging could be heard from within the forest. When she was done, Akemi grasped Mito by her neck, only to be swatted away when a clearly unscathed Mito grasped her arm and pulled her to her before kneeing her in the chest before ramming her fist into her face once more, rocketing her through several more trees. As she did so, Mito brought up both her hands and spoke. Take this. Harafaya. Fayasutomu, Hellfire. Firestorm, and then suddenly she raised her arms into the air as her hands suddenly shot out multiple orbs of hellfire into the air surrounding the minuscule area where Akemi was. As she did so, her eyes glared at the struggling Akemi. If you don't wanna die, then I suggest you get up, was her words before she dropped her arms downward, which the orbs somehow followed her movement. They suddenly shot down toward Akemi. Seeing this and seeing no other way out, Akemi grit her teeth before expelling her yukai outwards, surrounding her body in a sphere of blood-red yukai. She hoped it would withstand. Boom! A sphere of hellfire erupted from the forest, destroying all in its path. The ground shook and cracked as the chaotic winds and shockwaves formed. The attack blew past Naruto and Kushina, which didn't do much but ruffle their hair. Their eyes were on the fight completely, while Kushina led a small thank you that Naruki wasn't awake right now. That was smart of her, condensing her yukai around herself like a protective barrier. It was a good plan. Kushina said, to which Naruto just grunted. It wasn't enough. His words flowing in the chaotic winds of the aftermath shockwave. But his eyes were now showing a flicker of interest. Forest crater. Within the giant crater that still had smoke rising from within was Mito, standing there impassive as ever, her kimono billowing slightly in the wind. Her hair covering part of her eyes, which didn't stop them from glaring down below her at the smoking form at her feet. On the ground was Akemi, not dead but not fine either. Her body had slight burns and her kimono was burned greatly, showing much of her body. Parts of her silk black bra and panties, but none to showing. Her face though showed frustration above all. Damn it. I won't lose here. No, I won't, she said, not wanting to lose this last chance at life. A life she so desperately wanted more than anything. Mito, looking down at Akemi, just sighed. Akemi, you need to do a lot better than that to impress Master, if not you will die here, she said. Akemi seemed to stop struggling as she thought of what Mito said. She's right. I've been doing nothing to her, she doesn't have a scratch on her. I've been doing this all logically. I don't want to lose here. I want to make amends. I want to win this. I want to gain his lordship's interest. Akemi's eyes soon snapped open as her crimson eyes soon glowed pure blood red. An animalistic growl escaped her throat. Her eyes were glaring into Mito's own purple ones before she clawed at the ground. Then with a quick snap, Akemi abruptly stood up, her features getting more animalistic, her tails now waving around her in a slow motion. Crouching low on all fours, Mito let out a small smile. Good, you're getting serious, then show us what you have. Kyuubi no Kitsune. With Akemi rocketed toward Mito in a much faster speed, making Mito's eyes widen slightly. She didn't have time to put up a guard as a clawed hand rammed onto the side of her head. Her eyes widened a bit before her face met the ground once more, only this time the ground exploded upon impact. She briefly looked up to see Akemi's face, her crimson slitted eyes flashing, her growling like that of the true demonic fox she was. She smiled before it vanished. She soon kicked Akemi off her, sending the Biju into the air, which she soon flipped in the air. Standing up, Mito cracked her fingers before speaking. Good. Come at me, Akemi. Show Master your resolve. Show him your will to get stronger and make up for your mistakes, her demonic voice carrying a softer tone. With that, two shot toward each other. They both spoke in their own demonic tones as their demonic aura flared from them, destroying the ground around them or distorting the air in Akemi's case. Haru. Varajingu Ken, Hellfire. Blazing Fist, she said as her whole right was engulfed in hellfire, not burning her a bit as an sphere of hellfire shrouded her fist, making her whole arm blaze with hellfire, and a condensed sphere of highly concentrated hellfire surround her fist. Akemi didn't let up either, for she channeled most of her yukai in her left claw, making it explode with her yukai, making it glow with her crimson flame-colored yukai. She let out a small growl before she spoke of her technique. It soon formed into a snarling crimson-eyed yukai kitsune, its maw wide open, showing a pure black orb within its maw, getting bigger each second. Oju Ado. Kitsune Sutairu. Q by Furu Kudo Amari Dama. Biju Art. Kitsune Style. Nine-tailed full-powered Amari Sphere. Hearing her words made Mito's eyes snap wide open. As did Kushina's. Naruto's own eyes, though, lit up with full interest as a small smirk crossed his features. Hey, crazy little vixen, he thought, giving a slight chuckle as his hair shadowed his eyes from the swaying winds of both techniques giving off. Kushina eyed the technique until she hugged her daughter, a bit more worried the aftermath might hurt Naruki. Naruto, seeing her distress, spoke, "Don't worry, this aftershock won't hurt the child." She immediately calmed down. Just hearing her master's calming words made her feel at peace. "Why, yes, Naruto-sama," she uttered. Seeing she was calm, Naruto turned his gaze back at the two fighters and eyed Akemi with a approved eye, even if she didn't see it. The fact the approval was there showed how much she had already impressed him. Mito, seeing the attack coming at her, pushing her fist toward the attack, knowing the surrounding area was gonna be in great destruction afterwards. How right she was. H-A-A-A-A-A. Akemi shouted, plunging her full-powered attack towards Mito's own. The Devil Empress, impassive as ever, slammed her own attack with the opposing one. Hoping her master was watching, for she could see how determined Akemi was. If she was using something like this. Boom! A earth-trembling explosion appeared, destroying all that it touched. A sphere of mixing yukai erupted from the forest, incinerating all in its path. It was the color of hellfire mixed in with crimson yukai, making it look like a true sphere of fire. The shockwaves erupting from the sphere shattered small mountains and made the turbulent rushing winds blow past the impassive Naruto and quite surprised Kushina. Their hair once again billowed behind their backs, not once ruffling their hair. They watched the sphere of fire and death spread out more and more each second. The ground being completely incinerated and tearing itself apart, the clouds in the sky swirled around the monumental release of yukai as black lightning raced the sky itself. Seeing the sphere getting closer and closer to the volcano made Naruto sigh before he stretched out his hand and spoke. Barrier, he spoke as a giant non-visible barrier covered the whole volcano. It did its job. When the sphere touched the sphere, it completely and utterly halted, not able to move any further. Expectantly, since it didn't go any further, the sphere started to build up more and more into the sky like an oval before Naruto just closed his eyes. Boom! It did that exactly. The sphere exploded, making a pillar of smoke rise high above the sky of hell itself. Going through clouds all the way, it was never ending. Naruto stood in front of Kushina, knowing this aftershock would pass through the barrier and would hurt the child, and he couldn't let that happen. So as the aftershocks blew past him, he continued to gaze down at the now smoke-filled crater with an impassive look that conveyed the impressed look within his eyes. That attack Akemi used was actually strong enough to injure one of Lucifer's generals and could quite possibly wipe out a small group of the rebel forces. He was quite surprised at how much yukai Akemi used, and in such a condensed manner as well. It was much stronger than the other Biju's normal Amari, that was for sure. A few minutes later, when the smoke disappointed, Naruto and Kushina could see two shadows within the crater. Concentrating his gaze on the two, he let out a small smile before he spoke. "Come Kushina, it would seem the fight is over," he said before jumping off the cliff before floating down toward the crater, Kushina following him. Crater. Within the giant crater, the smoke rose into the air ever so slowly as the remaining yukai in the air seemed to float around like in never-ending fog. The fires of hell littered the ground in many different patterns. Within the raging aftermath of smoke and fire, was two shadowed forms, one standing, another laying upon the ground. The first was an amazingly unscathed Mito who had not a single scratch upon her flawless body. Her kimono was slightly burned, if anything, showing her bare shoulders and more of her toned legs. Everything else was unscathed, but, unlike her, Akemi was much worse off. The nine-tailed Biju was laying upon the ground with severe burns was Akemi. Her body was covered in multiple burns that was already healing but was quite severe. Her body had no clothing since her kimono was all but incinerated in the attack, with only her silk black bra and panties still there, but they themselves were barely hanging. Her eyes were closed, yet her slight breathing showed she was unconscious. Her fox ears laid flat upon her head as her tail sprawled out on the ground, not moving but with just a slight twitch. Kneeling before Akemi, Mito let a smile grace her features as she took her hand in her own and spoke, her impassive face now a gentle and sisterly one. She placed a hand on her cheek and smiled at her. "You did great, Akemi-chan. You did absolutely wonderful." Her words flowed into the unconscious Kitsune's ears and possibly the other. That's when she heard two soft taps land on the ground, so looking behind her, she saw the smiling happily Kushina, who was holding a sleeping Naruki, as Naruto himself was eyeing both her and Akemi with his usual impassive gaze. Sei gave them both a bow of her head before Kushina rushed to her side, checking if she were okay. As Mito frantically told her she was okay, Naruto walked over to the unconscious Biju and stood over her with a strange look in his eyes that had yet to show any intent to end her right there. More like the fact he was looking into her very being and analyzing her very soul. The two Uzumakis saw this and waited with bated breath on what their master was gonna do. But the next thing he did shocked them both. He gained a small smirk before speaking. "To use that and in such a highly condensed manner, you would have died if you were in Ningenkai if you used that. To have overpowered that attack and forcing everything into it. You are crazy, you little vixen," his words carrying a small amount of amusement and humor with each word. After a few seconds of no response, he kneeled down on his knee and picked up the unconscious Akemi. Carrying her in a bridal carry, he ignored the state of dress she was in and turned toward the surprised Uzumakis. "Purr" was the sound that come from Akemi before she unconsciously snuggled into Naruto, her head rest against his chest, making the devil gain a twitch in his eyebrow. Looking down at her, he half contemplated to just drop her right there and have Mito carry her. "Mito, Kushina, follow me, the woman needs rest," he said before he started to float back up to the cliff side. Kushina and Mito blinked before looking at each other before blinking again. Mito opened her mouth and spoke. "You think," she started, "that he's gonna let her stay?" Kushina finished. They blinked once more before giant smiles graced their faces before they shot up toward their master with pure joy flowing through their body. Kushina knew her daughter would be even more excited at this. Once reaching their master, they saw he was already walking into the cavern, which they quickly followed him inside. Though once they were by his side, they regained a slow pace with his own. Now Kushina, being the very curious redhead, had to ask. Anyo, Naruto-sama." The devil just gave her glance, which she saw as she had his attention. What are you going to do with Akemi, if I may ask?" This earned a sigh from the man. Before he kept walking. "Well, I'll cut straight to the point with you, Kushina, as well as you, Mito." She wasn't going anywhere fast during the fight. But even when she was losing, she threw away her logical thinking and gave into her demonic instincts. Now this is in some cases bad, but when it comes to a kitsune, relying on their instincts alone makes them a much more deadlier enemy. Kyuubi here before this has been relying on her mind, which weakened and allowed those humans to enslave her. That's not the only reason, but that when you two had that last clash, the power she put into that attack was a great deal of amount. he said, getting both of their attention as they absorbed the information from him. How much was it? This caused their master to just give a small chuckle before he spoke again, this time though with approval in his tone, which was quite rare to ever be heard from him except during their time they trained under him. Included with all the power of a nine-tailed Biju. She forcibly pushed more Yukai into the attack, making it having the amount of Yukai compared to one Kyuubi, and one Hachibi. This got gasps from both of them since they both knew from personal experience that using such levels of Yukai was very deadly to yourself. If you were to overexert yourself, you could start to die slowly if you emptied your reserves to complete zero, and even beyond that. Your body would slowly tear itself apart without Yukai to help keep your body be stabilized. How did she have that much Yukai? Kushina asked, her eyes gazing down on the unconscious Kitsune with awe and admiration in her eyes. Naruto just gave her a glance, not breaking pace. Remember about the Yukai gates each demon and devil has? He received a nod. They remember that lesson. The Yukai gates were similar to the celestial gates the humans have, but the Yukai gates obtained much more Yukai and increased your power 100x with each one you open. There is said to be 7 in all, named for each sin known to the 3 realms. That had seen their master release one, just for a demonstration, and when he unleashed the first gate they were immediately slammed into the ground by just the immense pressure of the Yukai flooding from their master's body. They still had nightmares when they remembered his appearance. It was so terrifying they were nervous around their master for a good couple of weeks. Even now they get extremely nervous if he were to ever resort to release one. Are you saying Akemi-chan released a gate? Mito said, to which Naruto just nodded. Yes, from what I saw and felt, Akemi had unintentionally released not 1 but 2 gates worth of Yukai, thus giving her the power of a whole Hachibi after fully powering her attack. She had flooded the attack with that extra jump start of Yukai just to win. She's lucky to be alive, he said as he gazed down at the sleeping Kitsune woman in his arms. Single quote, comma, ... which has impressed me. His next words made them snap their gaze at him in shock. Sensing this, he elaborated, for her to go to such extremes to prove her worth shows me how much she can keep her word. She hit her limit and went over it all to gain my approval, he said, making a flickering flame of hope come to life within Kushina and Mito's hearts. Does that mean? They both uttered silently, their words filled with such hope it was quite surprising. Naruto just sighed while closing his eyes. Yes, she has proved her worth. Starting tomorrow, Kyuubi no Kitsune, or better yet Akemi no Yoko, becomes my new slave. This made both Kushina and Mito both gain great big grins on their faces before Mito actually squealed of all things. Kushina couldn't do much, for she would wake up her sleeping daughter, but she was pumping her fist into the hair, giving a quiet, databane. Naruto himself just sighed even more in annoyance since he could see both Mito and Kushina's actions from even behind himself. Looking down at the woman in his arms, he sighed. Things are gonna get very hectic soon, and why do I feel like I'll be the center of it all? 10 minutes later, after following through the cavern, the group of 3 with the sleeping Naruki and unconscious Akemi counting as 2, they had arrived to Kushina and Mito's shock, something that was completely beautiful, in their opinion, for before either eyes after going through so many channels within the cavern. They had come on the outside of the giant volcano, and in front of their eyes was a house. No, not a house, what the hell were they thinking? They were seeing a freaking castle before their very eyes. It was a giant pitch-black castle. Surrounding the castle, though, was even more a shocker, especially in hell. The ground wasn't dead of life or barren of any plant life. But in fact, the land had green grass that was completely never seen in hell. Trees that were usually dead were in this one area fully alive. Of course, the sky itself was the usual blood red like always. They stood there shocked for quite a few minutes as Naruto just gazed at the place with irritation. Don't ask. He stopped their obvious question before he walked on, ignoring the grass around him or the fully alive trees. Kushina and Mito looked all around them, seeing the nature alive unlike the rest of hell was completely dead. No wildlife was here, but just the grass and trees were enough to bring a small tear to both their eyes. If there was one thing they missed from their old lives, it was the green grass and fully bloomed trees. Despite Kushina missing her daughter even more than anything, this was her second missed thing from Ningenkai. They briefly wondered how or exactly why their master, a devil and one of the most brutal ones to ever live, would live in such a place. The castle, though, was an opposite of the land, being midnight black in all. The bubbling lava around the castle with the black lightning dancing across the sky made it all the more suited place for a devil. Even if the green grass and trees didn't fit the area. The castle's design was strange at best, and they've seen a few of them in hell during their attacks with their master on Lucifer's strongholds. At least Naruki-chan has a place to play at, were Kushina's thoughts on the matter. Knowing her daughter was a bit too young to train at the moment and was a bit happy she could enjoy what childhood she has left. Even if it was in Makai. They followed their master till they came in front of the castle, and when they felt their master flare his yukai once, the giant wooden bridge came down slowly before ending with a loud click. Before he kept walking, which they followed. Once all three of them were off the bridge, it came back up once more. Now when Kushina and Mito were inside the castle, their jaws would have crashed right through the ground if it was possible. For before them something that was absolutely marvelous in their eyes. The outside of the castle was pitch black, but the inside was painted differently. The halls were mainly pitch black with purple streaks mixed in. A long red crimson blood carpet graced the hallway with white marble flooring, and even most rooms had this except the flooring had black marble instead. Statues of demons and gargoyles stood on both sides of the hallway. Metal knight statues as well stood tall and imposing to children if they ever saw one. Paintings of all kinds littered the hall, some showing great battles between demons and angels, some with demons fighting against other demons. On the ceiling was 2 chandeliers that lit with a bright glow. They knew there was more to the castle, though, since they had yet to even explore the whole place yet. Following their master, though, they marveled at the sight of the castle, its architecture and design. It was weird actually, for just being inside this castle made them feel right at home. Like this was their true home or something. After following their master for a good 5 minutes, they came before a door which he soon opened, leading to a room of great proportions. It was painted black as well, with a huge red carpet on the floor, 2 dressers with a built-in bathroom, 2 nightstands on both sides of a king-size bed. The bed being designed beautifully in Kushina's opinion, for it was beautifully crafted, showing artistic designs within the wood. Soft silk black sheets and a soft pillows that felt like the softest thing Kushina or Mito, for that matter, have ever touched. A giant blood-red cover finished it off with black flames licking the bottom of the cover. Smaller pillows littered the bed as a sign of decoration. They stood there amazed at the sight, as Naruto just grunted before throwing the pillows off before pulling the covers and sheets back. Then he set the sleeping yet healing Kitsune woman into the bed before he looked back at Kushina and Mito. Kushina, place the girl in the bed too. I doubt she's had any good rest for a while now. Afterwards, when they both wake up, she can get something to eat. She looks malnourished beyond reason, he said, to which she nodded. Walking to the other end of the bed before she gently placed Naruki inside. Then ever so slowly she covered her frame up with the sheet and cover before giving a kiss to her forehead. Good to have you back, Naruki-chan, she uttered before going back to Mito. With that, Naruto covered up Akemi before walking out the door, turning off the lights, Kushina and Mito following them, casting one more worried gaze on the two. Don't worry, you two. This castle is protected by special barriers and runes that make it completely impenetrable to any outside force. Anyone that tries to sneak in will be vaporized on the spot no matter who they are. His words of reassurance relieved them immensely. But questions started to pop into their minds as to what this place was and how it was linked to their master. Following him downstairs, they all came to another they finalized as the living room. They could see it was greatly decorated with 2 midnight black sofas and 2 dark violet chairs facing a giant fireplace, and facing the sofas was a giant plasma screen TV. Above the fireplace was a large painting, though of something Mito and Kushina couldn't identify. It looked though like a couple holding a little child in their arms. Kushina, Mito, stop dawdling and sit down. It's time to start explaining our next move. Their master's voice quickly shook them of their stupor. Looking back at him, they could see him standing in front of the fireplace. A firm look in his eyes made them audibly gulp. Once they sat down, Naruto turned around and gave them a sharp gaze that made them tremble on the spot. No matter what, if there was one thing that feared yet respected, it was their master. Things have changed, you too. Your training is gonna be upped by a few standards. I feel something stirring in the 3 realms, and it's only a matter of time before more battles break out. Added with my actions against heaven today, I'd say they're gonna be much more hostile than they ever were before. So from now on, you two along with Akemi shall be trained even harder than ever before, he stated, making both of them nod in unison. Seeing this, he continued, now on a lighter note, you may be wondering what this place is and why it's behind such a giant volcano. Well, the truth is, the place we were living at before was nothing more than an outpost. A training area for me and you two, but was also a lookout post for Lucifer's armies. Seeing as it's gone now, we'll have to resort to this place from now on, he mumbled irritatedly. Quirking an eyebrow, Kushina spoke, Master, as I may, but what is this place, and how is there even living plant life in this area? This made Naruto gain a twitch in his eyebrow before he sighed in slight annoyance. Well, this castle was once my old home, but I've never used it since I've always been on the road facing off against Lucifer and his men. As for your second question, I never really knew for sure, but I can only think after the great forest of Eden was destroyed by the first war between heaven and hell, its land was but obliterated. I think some of its soil, which held holy qualities that not even hell could poison, landed into hell, and more specifically this area behind the volcano, he said, answering both of Kushina's questions. The woman just nodded as she ran the information through her mind. Naruto sighed before he plopped right onto one of the purple chairs. Mito, seeing his exhausted state, got a bit worried and spoke, Naruto-sama, not to sound pushy, but it would help if you got some sleep. You've gotten no sleep for the past week or so. Do all the training, fighting Lucifer and getting Naruki, her words gaining Kushina's attention. Naruto just grunted, waving off Mito's concern. Even though she was right, he hadn't had much sleep for a while, but he had to be on guard. Lucifer could send his men out anytime, but knowing he was inside this castle was all the assurance he needed to lower his guard. Just a bit. My health nor sleep isn't important. What is, he couldn't finish before his eyelids slowly started to fall. Seeing this, Mito and Kushina stood up, worried only to see him in a few seconds passed out on the chair. Seeing he was asleep, Kushina and Mito both smiled briefly. Master is always watching out for us, even when he doesn't show it, huh? Kushina said, her eyes staring at her master's form with gentleness of that of a worried woman. Mito nodded in agreement, her own smile plastered on angelic face. Yes, even if he hides it well, very well, I can sense he cares for us in his own way and is doing everything he can to make sure we're protected while training us to become stronger so we can protect ourselves, she said as she slowly walked to his side before kneeling beside the chair, gazing at her master's sleeping face. Yeah, he deserves some rest, for all that he's done. Kushina said in agreement with that. They both slowly put his arms over their shoulders and struggled to lift his body off the chair. After doing so, they gently yet quickly went to find another room for him to sleep in. It took a few minutes, but, to their luck, they found a room with the same designs. But, the bed's color was that of dark violet with midnight violet covers. Slowly they unveiled the sheets before they started to place him in bed. They did have to struggle though, for whatever was beneath his clothing weighed more than a few tons or so. But, what the two didn't encounter though as they did this was Mito. Kushina. Stop right there. The stern voice of which they recognized immediately made them freeze in front of the doorway. Nervous yet feared expressions crossed their faces. Turn around. They did so without hesitation, but they did it quite slow, not wanting to meet their master's angered, in their mind's gaze. What they saw though made their eyes widened in shock. Naruto, their master, was looking at them with an impassive look. He was sitting on the bed with his feet touching the floor. But what shocked them was that he was pointing to the other side of the bed. If you two are gonna drag me to bed, then you're gonna sleep in the same room. Now get over here and get in bed, he said, to which they just nodded slowly while trying, and failing, at hiding their reddening cheeks. It only got worse for the two when their master took off his coat and boots before he discarded his shirt as well. When he discarded his shirt though, it was almost too much for the two women, for they were seeing the upper body of a god. Not a single flab of fat was upon his chest, he had a rock-hard 8-pack. His chest cleanly cut yet lithe. His skin unblemished, yet a few scars on his shoulders, an X-shaped scar where his heart is. Besides that, though they couldn't help but eye his body to their extreme embarrassment. They quickly got under the covers to hide their practical red glowing faces. It got redder when they felt Naruto get in the bed also. Those poor women would be like that for the rest of the night, sleeping completely on one side of the bed as to not wanting to disturb Naruto's sleep. If only they knew the situation they'd wake up in tomorrow.